I exhaled sharply as I lowered the revolver from my temple. Today marks the 5th anniversary of Nadia's disappearance. Hard to believe it's been that long. We had so much time left, so much life to live together, but that all came to a screeching halt half a decade ago on the day that we found those stairs. Without her, I have no purpose. I've got no family, no friends, and no one to keep me tethered to this world. So every year on the night that Nadia went missing, I stumble out to the spot that it happened with my 6-shooter in hand, halfway drowned in a handle of vodka, and I let the forest decide if I'm going to live for another year or if I'm going to be reunited with her, wherever she is. Now that it's determined that I have at least one more trip around the sun, I'll tell you how I ended up here at rock bottom. I need to get this out while I still have the guts to tell this story. I don't know why though. I'm going to wake up sometime tomorrow afternoon with a massive headache and no recollection of tonight's events. I'd better tell you while I still can. I've lived on the outskirts of Bear Creek National Park for my entire life. Don't bother looking it up. It's a fake name so nobody tries to seek out the evil that lurks here. It's safer that way. As I was saying, I used to live out here in a cabin with my dad. I miss him so freaking much. He passed away 8 years ago, leaving me all alone. Cancer. That was before Nadia and I had started dating. It's funny how things work out. I actually had met her at a coffee shop on my way back from visiting Dad's grave. When she approached me and asked if the seat across from me was taken, I was instantly smitten. Her deep blue eyes shimmered like the ocean. Long brown hair cascaded down her shoulders in waves. And that smile. When Nadia smiled, it was as if time had stopped, just for a moment, so that the whole world could soak in its breathtaking beauty. We were inseparable after that day. In a month we were dating, in 9 more we were living together in my cabin. And in another year we were set to get married. Had a date and a venue picked out and everything. I was on cloud 9. But that was all torn from me in an instant. God, I wish that I never would have taken her out there. I had my first encounter with the stairs when I was 7. Dad had always warned me never to climb them. That wasn't a problem for me though. The stairs, they exuded a malevolent presence. Like anyone who dared to walk up their steps would be eaten alive from fear alone. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was playing in the woods near the cabin when I saw it. A black, winding set of metal stairs that stretched may be a story. They didn't lead anywhere, they just kind of ended. All the stairs are like that. They vary in size and shape and model. But the one thing that they all have in common is that they don't lead anywhere, and they're never in the same place twice. They just sort of appear out of nowhere. No one knows how or why, and truthfully, we don't want to know. Most of us, that is. Nadia wanted to know, and that knowledge cost her everything. Come on, baby, just a little further. I want to see the sunset. Nadia whined in protest at my proposal to head back. Nadi, I know you do, but we didn't bring any flashlights and our phone batteries aren't worth a crap. I don't know about you, but I don't feel like smacking into trees every few feet on our way home. Oh, fine, you win. I'll go back this time, but promise that we come back tomorrow. She requested, puffing out her lower lip and gazing up at me with her best puppy dog eyes. I'd be lying if I said that they hadn't worked. Alright, I'll take you back out here tomorrow, but only if you, I trailed off, entranced by the sight of them. Nadia's brow knitted together in confusion as she traced my gaze, and then her jaw fell open. Directly before us stood a polished cedarwood staircase. I got a sinking feeling in my gut the moment that I laid eyes on that thing. It looked so out of place, like a rat in a fish tank. What is that thing? Nadia muttered, gaze still fixed to it. It's nothing, I'll tell you later, I said, snatching her hand and leading her in the opposite direction. Ow, Jason, let go. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Tell me what's going on or I'm not moving another inch. Nadia protested, crossing her arms defiantly. I sighed. There was no point in hiding it any longer. She was going to find out eventually. Okay, so this is going to sound completely unhinged, but please bear with me. Ever since I've lived here, ever since anybody's lived here really, people have been finding random staircases in the forest. They appear and disappear all the time, and you'll never find one in the same place twice. The stairs are a bad omen. Something awful happens if you climb to the top, but nobody quite knows what. All I know for certain is that we need to stay far, far away from them. Nadia rolled her eyes in response. Oh, come on, Jay, do you really expect me to believe that? A bad omen? Are you some kind of spiritual medium now? Ooh, a staircase, so scary, she said, waving her hands in a mocking gesture. Nadia, do I look like I'm joking? I know it sounds crazy, but I wouldn't lie to you. She softly took my hands into hers and met my gaze. Baby, you know that I wouldn't accuse you of that. It's strange, but if it really irks you that much, I won't press it, okay? Thank you. Now let's go home, I'm starving. Once we were out of sight of that wretched thing, I could sense the tension starting to disperse. It was as if a veil had been lifted. I fell asleep that night with a stomach full of dumplings and not a thought in the world besides the petite girl snuggled in my arms. The stairs had vanished from my brain just like they always did, until the next day. We both had the entire day off of work, and before I knew it, Nadia was pulling me back down the same path as the day prior to watch the sunset. Butterflies danced in my stomach as we approached the spot that we had seen the stairs the day before. Even so, Nadia noticed it first. Hey, isn't this the same place you pulled me away from yesterday? Those stairs, they're gone. You see, I told you they're a bad omen. Now do you believe me? I never said that I didn't. It's just a strange phenomena, you know, like seeing a unicorn. You don't really ever expect to find it, or in this case, not find it. It's a lot to process. I didn't know what to say. She had hit the nail on the head with her analysis. Except the staircases were no unicorns. No, they were something far more sinister. We continued our walk in silence until we had finally reached our destination. That evening will always stand out in my mind. The sky looked like a painter's canvas, a gorgeous amalgamation of purple and pink and orange melded together behind a smattering of white wispy clouds. I had never seen anything so picturesque. We stayed there well past the sun setting, staring up into a sea of stars illuminating the night sky. Thank you for keeping your promise. Today was perfect. Nadia yawned, sleepily resting her head on my shoulder. Every day with you is perfect. Thank you for dragging me out of the house. This really has been incredible. I love you so much. Oh, you're welcome, bonehead. I love you too. Nadia giggled quietly, her eyes struggling to stay open. All right, sweetheart, I think it's time for us to go back. You can hardly stay awake. Oh, just a little longer. You're so comfy, she protested, burying her face into my chest. My heart felt so full in that moment. What had I done to deserve such an amazing girl? All right, up we go, I said, hoisting my weary girlfriend into my arms. If your legs won't move, I have no choice but to carry you. Oh no, how terrible. Whatever shall I do? She quipped, wrapping her arms around my neck. Nothing. Just stay still and let me. I froze mid-stride. I swallowed a dry lump in my throat as sweat began to bead atop my brow. In the darkness among the foliage, my flashlight beam fell upon a large, bulky object. They were back. Jason, what's wrong? You look pale, Nadia said, following the ray of light until she realized what I was looking at. A wide set of weathered concrete steps ascended to nowhere. They called to me, begging me to climb them. Just one step. Just one, that's all. Jason, I feel it now. What you were talking about yesterday, I feel it. It's all wrong, they shouldn't be here. Nadia whimpered, fear jolting across her pupils. Yeah, you're right, I said, ripping my gaze from the awful thing. Just don't look at it, we're going to be okay. This time I wasn't as relieved once we had escaped the staircase's alluring pull. I had never seen the stairs 2 days straight before. They were always more sporadic in their appearance, never showing up with any rhythm or consistency, so to see them twice made me a bit uneasy. Nadia and I didn't mention the stairs again that evening. We were both absolutely exhausted and we were itching to get some much needed rest. I'd be damned if I was going to let a stupid staircase ruin a good night's sleep. Nadia was already snoring when I joined her in bed, and I was out the second that my head hit the pillow. If only we could have made it until morning, maybe then she would still be here. I awoke in a pitch-black room. Nadia was missing from her side of the bed. I didn't worry at first. It wasn't abnormal for her to sneak off to the bathroom in the middle of the night every once in a while. I didn't want to drift back off to sleep though until I had her beside me. I waited and waited to no avail, and then after what felt like an eternity, I finally called out, "Hey babe, are you coming back to bed soon?" I received no response, and that was when the panic set in. Nadia would never ignore me like that. I leapt out of bed and beelined for the bathroom. It was empty. My heart began to pound against my ribcage like a jackhammer. Sirens were blaring in my head, telling me that something was wrong, and I felt helpless to silence them. I turned the whole cabin inside out with no result. Nadia was nowhere to be found. And then, amongst all the chaos, an idea flickered in my head. Why hadn't I thought of it sooner? Nadia's phone was missing from the bedside table, but I could track her location on Find My Friends. I fumbled to unlock my own phone and open the app. I had to know that she was okay. I loaded up the app and located Nadia's icon. She was close. The app said that she was only a few hundred feet from the cabin. I threw on a pair of shorts and darted out into the frigid night air. I raced barefoot across leaves and rocks and acorns. I didn't have time to grab shoes. Right then, I didn't care if my feet were torn to ribbons, as long as Nadia was okay. I eventually reached the point where her phone should have been. I frantically called it, praying that she would pick up this time. I saw something illuminate amongst the leaves, and not far beyond it, I found who I was searching for. But instead of being overcome with joy upon finding the love of my life, my blood turned to ice. Nadia's face was partially illuminated by the moonlight trickling through the canopy. She was gazing down at me with tears streaming down her cheeks. Below her feet sat a staircase. This time it was ornate. White glassy marble stairs gleamed even in the darkness, topped off with a pristine red carpet. The stairs looked as if they would lead straight to heaven itself, and that terrified me. Dread crashed over me like a tidal wave as we stared at each other. I wanted to move, I wanted to sprint up to her and sweep her off those godforsaken things, but I couldn't. I was rooted in place, forced to watch as the girl of my dreams ascended the final step. "Jason, please, I don't want to go. I love you and want to stay with you forever. I had to know, I could feel them calling to me. Please don't let them take me." Nadia sobbed uncontrollably, reaching out a hand toward me. I wanted to grab it to pull her into my arms to tell her that everything was going to be okay, but I was stuck. I was forced to watch in abject horror as Nadia involuntarily took that one last step to the top. It felt as if time had slowed to a crawl. 1 second I was paralyzed, eyes locked on Nadia and those vile stairs, and the next I was all alone. Nadia and the staircase had vanished, wisped into the cool night air like they had never existed at all. The burden of that night will stay with me until the day that I die. I wailed, I screamed. I pounded the earth until my fists were bloody and my throat was hoarse. Nadia had been taken from me, right before my very eyes, and I did absolutely nothing. I blamed myself for a long time after that. Hell, I still do. I don't think I'll ever be able to move on. That's my punishment, I suppose. Living out a dull and meaningless life, While images of my lost girlfriend run through my head day in and day out, it's why I drink. Strangely enough, I've never seen the stairs again, though really the only reason that I'm still here. Because maybe if I just give in, maybe if I convince myself to climb that one last looming step, then there might be a chance that I'll be reunited with Nadia. And for me, that's a chance that I have to take. Every day, my cat acts like she's running the house, and honestly, she probably is. I'm just here to open doors, pay bills, and make sure that the food shows up on time. That's why I feed her Smalls. This podcast is sponsored by Smalls. Fresh, protein-packed cat food made with real, human-grade ingredients that you would actually recognize from your own fridge, delivered right to your door. Cats.com even named Smalls their best overall cat food. I switched after my cat kept turning her nose up at regular kibble, and the difference was immediate. I did the 2-bowl test and she went straight for Smalls. Now she follows me around every morning until I feed her like it's her official routine. And getting started is easy. You can share your cat's diet, health, and preferences, and Smalls builds a personalized meal plan for you. No more guessing in the pet food aisle, and it's risk-free. If your cat won't eat it, they'll refund you. So stop guessing which meals will upset their stomach. For a limited time, because you're a Creepscast listener, get 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/MrCreeps. One last time, that's 60% off your first order plus free shipping when you head to smalls.com/MrCreeps. You found it where? That was my reaction when my team leader came into the operations room and told us that they found one of the staircases in the middle of a forest. This was the first occurrence of it manifesting outside the facility, and it caused both confusion and worry for us in the exploration team. For the past few months, the organization had been experimenting in interdimensional travel, but not in the way that you would expect. Instead of opening up wormholes and using portals, they used a method that seemed strange and laughable to us at first. Staircases. Yes, that's right, plain old wooden staircases. I won't go into the exact science behind it because even I don't really understand how it works. It's complicated, extremely complicated. One glimpse at these squints, boards, and walls were enough to tell me that it was all beyond my understanding. Not that that's saying much, since most of us in the exploration team are pretty down on the scale, since they only require people who are healthy, could carry the necessary equipment, and can follow instructions. Anyways, all I know is that whenever the scientist activates some kind of ancient machine, it manifests a staircase with a set of 10 steps that seemingly leads to nowhere. However, despite its rather simple and innocent sight, it was actually a gateway to a room in another dimension. From the bottom of the staircase, it was hard to tell where it would lead you. Going up the first few steps didn't change much and you would still see nothing. But once you get to that last step, you're taken to a whole new dimension. What extra-dimensional room the staircase would lead to was always a mystery. It was different every time a staircase was conjured up, and no two staircases ever led to the same place. The only consistent thing was that it led to a room, sometimes extremely large and sometimes extremely small, but always a room with no exit. Other than that, nothing was certain. Was it going to be safe? Would it be inhabited? Would it be useful for humanity? These were questions these scientists would ask every time they spawned a staircase. It was up to the exploration team to find the answers for them. Now I know what you're thinking. Why not send a drone or a robot in there? Wouldn't they do the same job without risking human lives? Well, it turns out that interdimensional hopping is not friendly with such technologies. For some reason that I, as well as these science boys, do not know why yet. Anything digital just gets fried when crossing dimensions. And that's why unmanned options were quickly rolled out and why we in the exploration teams had to use analog equipment. Recruited from those people who would not be missed or were crazy enough to abandon everything and go head first into danger. We in the exploration team were essentially guinea pigs that were paid considerably for their role in science. Personally, I like to think of myself as belonging to the latter group. But let's face it, I'm more of the former. No significant other, no more living family that I'm close with, not even a dog. I was a nobody. But at least I was a rich nobody. I just gotta make sure that I lived long enough to be able to spend the wealth that I was accumulating. And luckily for me and everybody on the team, most of the dimensions that we had explored had been largely harmless. Creepy, but harmless. From an empty room with nothing but pitch black darkness to a humongous one that was filled with mountains of bones and rather passive of floating eyes. And the places we explored were enough to give anyone nightmares. That's probably why we had to go through constant psych evaluations before and after each exploration. However, as interesting these strange and terrifying dimensions were, they were not what our organization wanted. After all, the goal of the organization was to find a dimension that would greatly benefit humanity. At least that's what they told us. Talk in the mess room, though, says that it was more on finding a dimension that could bring a large profit for the top dogs who run the organization. Personally, I don't care, as long as they keep on giving me my paycheck. With all the previous dimensions giving nothing that satisfied the organization's demands, the scientists were under constant pressure to find one that would bring in the money. This pressure on them was all too evident to us in the exploration team, as our old pace of exploring 2 staircases a week soon shifted to 14 staircases a week. It quickly became tough for us to work, as we found ourselves constantly in demand. If we were lucky, we would get a small room that only required one member of the team looking around for a few minutes, but we were never lucky. Ever since the science team started working on overdrive, the rooms that we got were mostly the big ones. Not only that, but they seemed to get constantly bigger with each new staircase conjured up, often taking the full team hours to explore. These rooms were time-consuming and exhausting. To make matters worse, once we were done, we often walked down the stairs empty-handed. It was clear that the bigger rooms were just as devoid of anything useful or profitable as the smaller ones. After nearly 3 weeks of this, morale was low for everyone. We did, however, catch a day's break when we were told that the science team were going to work to adjust the ancient machinery in order to get better results. This breakthrough didn't last, though, because that was the same day that a staircase manifested in the middle of the forest. The tech boys were messing around with their machine when it suddenly activated on its own, our team leader Jonathan said after giving us the shocking news. Strangely though, nothing appeared. They checked and swept the testing floor but found no new staircases. They then checked the rest of the facility and still found nothing. With no luck, they then had to ask the security team to send out vehicles and choppers to scan the nearby area. They eventually found the thing in the middle of a forest 20 miles from here. 20 miles, I said. I didn't know it was possible for them to spawn that far from the machine. Yeah, well, after all the tinkering the tech boys have done, I think anything is possible with that toy of theirs at this point, Jonathan huffed. Yeah, anything except find the dimension that the higher-ups want, I remarked. So what happens now then? Rachel, one of the newest members of the team, had asked. They want us to explore it, Jonathan simply said. No use in wasting a good set of staircases, I guess. Henry, an explorer who had joined the same time as me, sighed. You know it, Jonathan said. All right, I want section 2 on this. I winced when I heard this. That was my section. We head out in 10 minutes, so be there at the transport bay with all your gear and equipment, Jonathan informed us. The sooner we get there and get this done, the sooner we get back. And who knows, we might get lucky and get a small one. As if. Charlie, the most senior member of Section 2, replied. We haven't had a small room for so long that I'm starting to forget what they look like. As small, Christine, the leader of our section, plainly replied. Just like you. Oh, shut up, Charlie groaned, as all of us in Section 2 got up and got ready for the sudden mission. An hour later, we were at the outpost the security and science team had set up near the rogue staircase. Looking around the little camp they made, I couldn't help but find it all too familiar. Aside from the dirt and trees, all the equipment set up around the staircase made it feel similar to the setup that they had back at the facility. For a second, this made me think that everything was going to be routine as always. After being briefed by the science team and gearing up, we were quickly lined up at the bottom of the staircase with Jonathan at the lead. He had the habit of wanting to be the first one to cross in any mission that he was involved in. I guess he felt that the leader of the exploration team must always be ready to lead from the front whenever the opportunity arose. Check your suits and double-check them, he told us as he gazed up at the stairs. You never know what could be out there waiting for us. He didn't need to tell me twice. I was already busy scrutinizing every inch of my hazmat suit before the words left his mouth. Since the rooms we entered were never meant for humanity to step foot on, many of them contained various hazardous elements that we needed to protect ourselves from. Thus, all of us on the team were equipped with the best hazmat suits the organization had. As we finished checking our suits, Jonathan began moving down the line to double-check our suits himself, as well as tugging on our safety harness and lanyard. Protocol demanded that anybody crossing dimensions must be secured by a safety harness tethered to a mechanism that was ready to pull us back to safety. Although it gave us some reassurance that we would be rescued from danger when needed, its true purpose was to recover the valuable data and samples that we gathered. Through the use of various equipment ranging from VHS cameras, Geiger counters, range-finding equipment, and sample collection tools, every section that entered a room was well equipped to attain all the information that the eggheads needed. To their dismay, though, we couldn't transfer the data as fast as they wanted to, and there was always the risk of it being lost if we encountered trouble. Ideally, we would have transmitted the information the moment that we got them, since the eggheads often got anxious waiting and it lessened the chance of losing data if we didn't make it back. However, for whatever reason, radio and phone cable communication between two dimensions doesn't work. This thus left us with no other choice but to write down the data and place them in a canister, before tossing it back to the other side. Now, this was easy for the smaller rooms, but nearly impossible for the larger ones. And that's why we often just noted down the readings that we got so that in the event that we were incapacitated or worse, they could just reel us back in with our notes and samples. Once our suits and equipment were checked multiple times, Jonathan returned to his position at the head of the line and gestured to the lead scientist that we were ready to enter. Once he had received confirmation, he looked back at us and gestured towards the staircase. I'll go in first to check the situation on the other side. With any luck, this would just be a small room, he said before taking the first step. Hopefully not too small, I heard the muffled voice of Charlie say behind me. I couldn't help but nod at this. The story of one member from a different section entering a room that was only 1 foot by 1 foot in size was a story familiar to everyone in the team. Like I said earlier, the rooms are mostly harmless, but not completely. Every once in a while, a section would encounter a dangerous room that would bring on casualties. As I stood there, I prayed that what we were about to encounter was not one of them. But I didn't want to bring my hopes up. It had been a good while since a dangerous room had been encountered. Add that to the fact that this staircase was far from normal, then the chance of its room being equally far from normal were high. Shaking my mind away from these thoughts, I returned my focus back to reality and looked towards Jonathan, who was already going up the staircase, halting at the second-to-last step. Jonathan paused for a few seconds to check the compact camcorder that he was carrying. After making sure that it was on, He cautiously took the final step and soon vanished from our sight. All of us knew that he was now on the other side as we held our breaths and anxiously waited for his return. If he didn't come back within 5 minutes, the emergency recovery system would be activated and he would be yanked back to our dimension. To our relief though, we saw him come back down to the second to the last step after only 2 minutes. Bad news, everyone. The room is huge. Other than that though, it seems pretty safe. All readings are normal and there are no beings or anomalies wandering nearby. He informed us before pausing to think. I couldn't see the walls from where I stood, but my estimates say that it's a class 5 or more. That last remark was for both us and the science team. A class 5 room meant that we had at least 5 hours to explore the place and gather data before the recovery team would begin pulling us back if we did not return. Alright then, Christine, who was now heading up the stairs, said, "Let's check this place out and hopefully find something interesting." Personally, I would rather find nothing than something interesting, but I followed close behind her with the same enthusiasm as the rest of the section. As Christine approached the top, Jonathan turned back and crossed dimensions again. Following close behind was Christine, camcorder already in hand, and soon enough, she too disappeared, leaving me to follow next. Making sure that my own camcorder was on, I made my final step in our dimension and crossed to the other side. What I saw was not what I expected. Instead of seeing a large room with Jonathan and Christine waiting for me, I saw a set of stairs leading downwards towards a small clearing in a dark forest. At first, I thought that I somehow got disoriented and I was looking back down the staircase, but that didn't make sense, because there was nobody else there. No members of my section, no members of the science, recovery, and security team. No one. This was not the same place. In fact, it wasn't even the same time of day. When I made the crossing, it was clearly daytime, and over here though, it was night. This was strange. No, it was beyond strange. Encountering a room that looked like a forest wasn't anything new. Many sections have seen some of the rooms before, but to have the vanguard of the section disappear without a trace, now that was something that I'm not sure had happened before. Sighing, I lifted my camcorder and began to film my surroundings. Meanwhile, I kept my head on a swivel, using the flashlight of my suit's hood to light up the nearby trees. "Jonathan! Christine!" I called out, hoping to hear a reply. But there was no response and I could see no sign of anybody nearby. At that point, I realized that the place must not have been as safe as Jonathan had originally thought. If the two of them were missing, then it could mean that something in the environment or something lurking in this area could have eradicated or taken them. Feeling the fear rising within me, I dropped the camcorder and allowed it to dangle from its cord. With my now free hand, I quickly grabbed my Geiger counter, turned it on, and began using the probe to scan the area around me. To my relief though, the readings only read 0.20 microsieverts per hour. That was a normal amount for background radiation. However, this data did little to completely ease my fear, and there was still the question of what happened to my team leader and section leader. Cautiously, I scanned my surroundings again, trying to see if there was anything lurking there and waiting to pounce on me, but I found none. So I was left there, standing all alone, wondering what had happened to the two of them. It was at that moment of wondering that another realization hit me. Why was I alone here? Concerned, I decided to look behind me, hoping to see the other members of my section walk in. They should have already crossed, but maybe there was a delay on the other side that I didn't notice when I jumped in. As these seconds passed though, not a single one appeared. As these seconds turned into minutes with still no sight of them, I knew that they were not arriving. This was not right. They should be close behind me, as something terribly wrong was happening. Trying my best to keep calm, I tried to think on how I should proceed next. However, as I was thinking, my eyes fell on a bone-chilling sight. Crouching down, I grabbed my lanyard and lifted it up to my eyes. Seeing it up close only confirmed what I already caught a glimpse of. It had been cut. Studying it in complete shock, I saw a neat, clean cut on it. Not a tear, but a straight cut, as if somebody had used a knife. If it was a knife though, then it must have been an extremely strong knife to be able to cut through the lanyard that the organization used. Whatever the reason for it being cut, one thing was clear. My only connection to my dimension had been severed. This was bad. I needed to get back. Protocol demanded that any loss of connection with the home dimension necessitated an immediate return. With that in mind, I dropped the lanyard and began feeling for the exit that should take me back. In my panic, I rushed towards the direction that I came from, expecting that I would immediately be taken back to my dimension. However, to my complete horror, instead of phasing through and reappearing back home, I instead fell from the top of the stairs that I was standing on, and I landed on the hard ground below. Landing on my left arm, I lay there stunned and in pain. I was sure that I had broken my arm from that fall, and the aching sensation it gave was terrible. Eventually, though, I managed to gather my strength and roll myself so that I would be facing upward. As I did so, I noticed what was staring down at me. It wasn't a ceiling like I had seen in so many rooms. Instead, it was an open night sky. Looking at it with disbelief, I felt that my eyes were betraying me. Never before has any exploration team encountered anything but a room. For a second, this made me speculate that what I was seeing wasn't the real night sky. Perhaps the room was just really tall and that I just couldn't see the ceiling. After all, we had encountered such rooms before. Then again, I don't think we ever found a room that had stars twinkling in its artificial sky. No, this wasn't a room. This was a real open space. I had never encountered something like that before. I don't think anyone in the exploration team has. The place just kept on getting stranger and stranger with each passing second. Managing to get up, I started to assess my injury and realized that I had broken a bone during the fall. Feeling the pain from the injury and knowing that I had to apply first aid, I cautiously looked for anything that I could use to make a splint. Finding a large twig, I began making the splint with it and bandages for my first aid kit. It hurt a lot, but I tried to control myself from making too much noise, or else attract any entities or creatures that may be lurking nearby. After all, I still wasn't sure if this place was fully safe. Once I was sure that the splint was good, I turned back towards the staircase and wondered if I was indeed trapped here. Moving back up the stairs, I halted at the last step and waved my good arm in front of me. Nothing. As an extra measure, I repeated the process, desperately praying that my hand would disappear. But it did not. There was no way back home. Sighing, I sat on the step, feeling defeated. It was at that moment when I noticed something odd about the trees. They had moved. I only caught a glimpse of it, but I was sure that they had moved. Locking my eyes on the closest tree, I watched them swing left and right, but there was no breeze. No, it wasn't the wind that made it do that. It was because it moved. Keeping my focus on them, I waited for it to do it again, but nothing happened. As if they were taunting me and making me question what I saw, the trees stayed still. However, just as I was about to give up, I saw it happen again. Right in front of me, the trees began to shift from where they were and move a good 30 feet. Without lifting themselves out of the ground, they pushed their way through the ground before halting and staying in place once more. Observing this a few more times, I realized that they seemed to be doing this every 15 minutes. Why they were doing it, I wasn't sure, but it certainly wasn't the weirdest thing that I've encountered when compared to past dimensions. It also didn't seem like a danger to me. It was just strange, just like any other dimension. So what had happened to Jonathan and Christine then? There must have been some other anomaly or entity hiding here. Wondering what my next move should be, I contemplated whether I should stay there and wait for rescue or if I should explore the surrounding area and find a way to save myself. After weighing the options, I eventually decided to go look around. The chance of somebody from my dimension coming to rescue me was slim to none. After all, we explorers were expendable and the organization was not going to expend resources trying to recover me or whatever data I may hold if the dimension that I was in was this dangerous. There was no profit in dangerous dimensions. It would only cost more for them. With that dreary thought in mind, I got up from the steps, went back to the forest floor and began moving away from the staircase in order to explore this strange new place. There wasn't much to see though, even as I drifted farther and deeper into the forest. Everywhere that I looked was just more and more trees, doing their strange dance every 15 minutes. Aside from that, the land was empty and flat, with no landmarks or anything of interest. For half an hour, I found myself wandering around and wondering if I was moving at all, as the whole place looked the same no matter where I went. It was just rows upon rows of moving trees. However, as I continued in my search, I eventually noticed that the grouping of the trees started to become denser. From the average of 30 feet near the staircase, it lessened to 20 feet. And as I went on, it soon lessened to 10 feet, as the forest around me started to feel more crowded. Curious by this, I began to follow the dense clustering of trees. It was clear they were converging towards something. Eventually, I found what I was looking for. Nestled in between a circle of trees was one tree. At first, it looked plain and similar to all the other trees. However, after a few minutes passed by, the tree began to shake violently. Rocking in all directions, I first thought that it was about to fall. To my amazement though, the tree remained rooted up, and instead shook out of it 8 similar trees, which began to move outward from it. Meanwhile, all the other trees surrounding them began to move outward too, as they shifted and made room for the newly created ones. The trees, perhaps all of the trees in the forest, came from that single tree. They were multiplying from it. They were all clones of that one tree. Sadly for me, it was of little help towards my situation. Sighing, I took a moment to sit down, being sure not to place myself in the path the trees moved through. Allowing myself a moment's rest, I let out a groan of both frustration and pain, feeling both my mental and physical state aching. A quick break from exploring is something that I clearly needed at that moment. However, before I could relax myself and clear my mind, a series of ear-piercing crackles suddenly echoed. These crackles then began to increase with each second until it reached a point that it was practically shrieking. It took me a second to realize that it was my Geiger counter going crazy. Worried by the sounds that it was making, I grabbed the device and brought it to my face to read the data that it was giving me. What I saw made my eyes grow wide. 1 million microsieverts per hour. Yeah, that was bad, extremely bad. I needed to get out of there. Prolonged exposure to that level of radiation would be fatal for me. Thus I wasted not a second more towards figuring out what could have caused the sudden spike in radiation, as my instincts quickly kicked in. Suddenly filled with adrenaline, I got myself up and began moving. It started off as a fast walk, but I soon quickened my pace until I found myself running. I didn't know where exactly I was running to, but I prayed that it was somewhere that had less radiation in the environment. Encountering the first bit of luck I had since arriving in the dimension, I was relieved when I glanced at the counter and saw the reading had lowered down to 500,000 per second. At least that told me that I was heading away from the source of the radiation. A little further down, I checked the device again and saw that the reading had lowered down to 100,000 microsieverts per hour. A minute later, and another check read 1,000 microsieverts per hour. This was good and much safer, but I decided to continue on further until the background radiation had dropped to zero point 0.2 microsieverts per hour. Once I was sure that I was in safe ground, I allowed myself to catch my breath. Checking my surroundings as I did so, I saw that I was now in an area where the trees were more loose and far apart. But just like in any other portion of the forest, the trees seemed never-ending and there was no sign of the edge. Sighing, I stumped on the ground, feeling frustrated. There seemed to be no escaping this forest, and there seemed to be no escaping this dimension. Not wanting my mind to further wander towards depressing thoughts, I decided to look around once more in order to get my bearings. If anything, that would at least distract me from my own pessimism. With nothing helpful for me in the forest, I decided that it was best to return to the staircase and hope that the link back towards my dimension had returned. However, as I was trying to figure out that path back there, my Geiger counter started to act up again. Checking it, I was surprised to see that it was moving back towards 1,000 per hour. At first, I thought it meant that I ended up at another source of radiation. However, as I watched it rise to 100,000 microsieverts per hour, it dawned upon me that the source was not a stationary location, but it was moving and approaching me. That would explain why my Geiger counter only started going crazy after I sat down earlier, and not while I was approaching the area. It wasn't a place that was radioactive. It was some sort of mobile entity. Looking back towards where I had come from, I stared on with fear, wondering what kind of entity could be emitting such high levels of radiation. Not too keen on finding out, I began moving once more. The only good thing I thought at the time was that I seemed to be faster than the radiation-carrying entity. Despite this, I knew that there was still the possibility that it had better endurance than me. With my injury, I could only go so far before the pain would force me to stop, even with adrenaline still pumping in my veins. While I ran, I made sure to monitor the Geiger counter to ensure that its readings lowered as I got farther. As long as I kept it to 1,000 microsieverts per hour and below, I knew that I would be safe. To my dismay, though, that number held firm at around 100,000, telling me that it was keeping up pace with me. So much for being able to outrun it. And despite my best attempts to move faster, I found my efforts fruitless. As the Geiger counter started to shriek, it was gaining speed and it was getting closer. Daring myself to look behind me, I noticed a faint green glow emitting in the distance. Hidden by the trees, I couldn't quite see what was making that glow, but I did know that seeing its light meant that it was really close. For the next few minutes, I found myself running and dodging trees, doing my best to get away. But the sound of my Geiger counter told me that I was meeting little success and I was losing this game. And deep inside, I knew that the entity behind me would eventually catch up and get me. Not that it needed to be next to me to kill me. All it had to do was get close enough and maintain that distance in order to bombard me with more than 1,000,000 sieverts of radiation. Eventually, I knew that I was a goner. I didn't know how much time had passed, but the pain from my arm and exhaustion was getting to me. I was slowing down and the entity behind me was getting closer and closer. I gave up on checking my Geiger counter, but the sound of it shrieking told me that whatever was chasing me was close enough that I was being hit by high doses of radiation. Oddly enough, I didn't feel nauseous or sick from it. Instead, the only pain that I was feeling was from my arm. This, however, did little to ease my fear and sense of dread. Wanting to face my fate directly, I stopped in my tracks and I took in a deep breath. Closing my eyes, I then turned around and confronted my pursuer. When I opened my eyes, I found myself facing a bone-chilling sight. It was a tall, skinny woman whose skin was dried and glowing green. Staring at me with empty, hollow eyes, she gave a smile that nearly made my heart stop. Her cheeks, instead of being covered with skin, was completely exposed, revealing to me her rotten teeth. It looked as if she herself had been the victim of radiation. But I was not able to feel a single ounce of remorse for her, as I was too busy fearing for myself. Standing there in shock, I watched as she moved closer and closer towards me, her green glow almost blinding me from its shine. I wasn't going to run though. I was ready to face it head on. I thought that it might even be a good thing, as it would spare me from suffering in this endless land of trees. As the glowing woman got close, she briefly halted and placed her hand on my chest. Despite my suit, I felt the warmth of her hand on my skin. Looking down, I stared on in horror to see that her touch somehow melted away my suit and my clothing, leaving behind a gap that allowed her to touch my bare chest. Looking back at the glowing woman, she simply kept up that eerie smile, as her hollow eyes stared right into my very soul. It was unsettling, and I found myself having difficulty breathing. But it wasn't from her touch, nor from the radiation that she was emitting. No, it was from the sight of her alone. Eventually, she pulled her hand away from me and turned away. Without doing anything else, she began to move away from me. I watched, completely confused, as she got farther and farther until she was a faint glow in the distance. That glow became less and less while my Geiger counter slowly started to ease the noise that it was emitting. Soon the glow was gone and my instrument was silent. I was alone again. Left baffled by what had just happened, I cautiously lifted my good arm and moved my hand towards my chest. Feeling for any wounds, I was surprised to see that she didn't seem to have left a mark on me. In fact, it didn't seem like any harm came to me, as I didn't feel any sickness from the radiation that I was exposed to. However, these positive thoughts came too soon, as my body suddenly started to shake uncontrollably. Feeling my muscle spasm, I was left helpless as pain suddenly overtook me. Letting out a cry of agony, I found myself constantly shaking while being overpowered with terrible sensations that made it feel like I was being torn apart. Not knowing what was happening and being bombarded by an avalanche of pain, all I could do was scream and cry as I fell onto the forest floor. I couldn't tell how long this went on for, but I know that I continuously begged for it to stop. Yet the pain kept on going and going, growing more and more in intensity. At one point, I thought I was going to go unconscious from what I was suffering, but my body refused to let me go out and I was left there tortured by the entire ordeal. Whatever that woman did to me, it didn't seem like it would end quickly. While I laid there shaking and in agony, I suddenly started feeling bloated. This was followed by a sensation of my limbs becoming swollen. Desperately, I tried to check myself, but to no avail. The pain was just too much and my eyes remained shut as I screamed and shook. The sensation of my body expanding continued on and I felt my splint, suit and clothes rip apart. This was bad and I feared that I was about to explode. It didn't seem like the best way to die, but during that terrible moment, I was willing to take any form of relief, even death. To my dismay, it didn't happen. Instead, I continued to suffer and feel myself seemingly inflating before a sudden snap struck me. It's hard to describe the feeling, but it was as if a part of me had suddenly ripped off. And then just like that, the pain subsided. Although feeling sore, I was relieved that the intense sensations that tormented every part of me had largely stopped. The pain of my broken arm was still prevalent though, especially after it had been aggravated by what had just happened. Despite this, what I was feeling was certainly better than what I had just endured, as it allowed me to think clearly and figure out what had just happened. As I was opening my teary eyes though, I was confronted by a sight that I did not expect. There, laying in front of me and staring at me blankly, was myself. At first, I thought that I was imagining things and was just hallucinating after the pain that I went through. But as I lifted my good arm and moved it in front of me, I felt my hand make contact with the bare skin of the version of me that was staring back at me. It was real, and there really was a copy of me right there. It didn't take long for it to dawn on me what had just happened. That was my clone. It was a copy of me that spawned directly from me. I had become just like that tree. At that point, I had no doubt that she did the same thing to the tree after gracing it with her touch. Letting out a curse of anger, I did my best to get up as fast as I could. While the version of me seemingly copied what I did and tried to get up, albeit a little more clumsily. It may have been a copy of me, but it seemed to lack much sentience and fine motor skills. All it could do was copy my actions and do its best to mimic them. In keeping my distance, I stared at my copy with both fear and curiosity. In return, it stared back at me with cold and soulless eyes. For the most part, though, it didn't seem to be in any harm, as it seemed just confused and lost. So what was I to do now? That was the thought that circled my mind as I stood there. Recalling the tree that I encountered earlier, I shuddered at the thought that I would have to go through that process again. If I was cursed by the same thing that it had, then that meant I had 15 minutes before another clone would be forced out of me again. I was not looking forward to that at all. But what could I do to stop it? Nothing. The sad truth was that I was helpless to it. For a moment, I thought of laying back on the ground in despair, knowing that I would have to endure the cycle of torturous pain again when the time comes. I wished that the woman had just killed me. What she gave me was a fate worse than death, and I wondered how long I would have to endure it. If I was lucky, I would die from it. But the fact that I didn't go unconscious throughout the process didn't give me high hopes that I could escape the curse that easily. There was no hope for me. As if to prove this point, I suddenly felt my body shake again. Raising my good arm, I saw it intensely shake again, as my whole body began to spasm. Fear and anger rose up inside of me, as I felt the terrible process start up once again. Helpless at stopping it, all I could do was wonder why it was happening again so soon. The tree had taken 15 minutes before it had replicated itself, but for me, barely 5 minutes since I had a clone torn out of me, and a new one was about to come out. Why was it happening so fast? There was no time for me to answer that question, though, as my body shook intensely once more until I felt myself increase in size again. It was painful and terrible. Experiencing it the first time did not prepare me for the second one. Just like before, I agonized and fell to the ground, screaming and shouting. All the while this was happening, the first clone just stood there and stared at me, its expression clueless and blank. I cursed at it as I laid there in pain. I cursed it, the woman, and this whole dimension. And then a familiar feeling of having a part of me splitting off came, and once more the pain began to subside. Sighing in relief, I felt comfort knowing that it had stopped. But then a sense of dread quickly struck me, as I knew that in a few minutes it would repeat, and I would have to do it all over again. Yet even the small brief window of rest was denied from me, as a second later my body began to shake again. Letting out a scream of frustration, I soon cried out in pain as the process started way faster than before. I was so engrossed in panic and fear that I barely noticed the recent clone that came for me. It was only when I was shaking on the ground and looking at the dark night sky that I noticed the clones. In fact, I saw 3 of them. For a moment, I was able to push out the pain as I stared at the 3 sets of eyes looking down at me with blank stares. 2 clones had come out of me. And not only was the process starting faster, but the number of clones was doubling. Did that mean it would become faster and increase in number each time that it happened? As if to answer my question, I felt my body inflate again and stretch my skin. Before long, 3 clones split off from me, rolling on the ground right next to me. Panting in weariness, I barely acknowledged them when the shaking started all over again. All I could do was scream in pain and let the tears roll down my eyes. I was in hell. For the next hour, the process kept going and going, torturing my body and making me experience that insane pain on repeat. No matter how much it happened though, my body somehow endured. I couldn't pass out, I couldn't die. I should have, I wished I could, but it didn't happen. My mind though was faring worse, as I was left trapped in my body that was painfully replicating over and over again. Eventually I lost track of time and I stopped screaming. All the screaming that I could do was in my head, as I watched more and more of my face stare down at me with empty expressions. If I could bash those faces in, I would, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed. As the process continued, the area that I was in started to get crowded by the bodies of my clones. Standing up after they spawned, they would just end up staying in place, not moving until pushed by the new set of clones. Looking around from where I lay, I saw a sea of feet, with the trees no longer visible. If I didn't move, I would end up trapped like that, forced to live in even worse hell than what I was already suffering. Managing to rally what little strength that I had left in me and ignoring the pain as best I could, I willed myself to stand up. It was difficult. The first few times I failed, as clones ripped themselves from me, making it tough to even get on my knees. With great effort though, and timing things just right, I was able to get up on my knees and with my free hand, shakily grab a newly created clone in order to pull myself up. Eventually I was on my feet, using the clone spawning from me as support. Looking around, all I could see was my own face, a sight that I was already sick of. The place was crowded, but there was still enough room to move around. But how long would it be before this whole place was filled with only copies of me? With a new one being ripped from my body every few seconds, I knew that it would all start piling up. I had to get to a better place, I had to get to higher ground. Staring at the closest tree near me, I knew that that would be the ideal place. It would give me some breathing room and get me away from the stupid blank faces that looked at me. And making my way through the crowd of myself, I slowly moved towards my goal. It was a hard and unbearable task, just like getting up from the ground, but through the pain of being forcefully cloned, I managed to get to the base of the nearest tree. Pushing away the clones there, I vented out some of my frustration and anger by shoving them away hard. And then after a new set of my clones had separated from me, I used their bodies to help me up towards the closest branch on top of me. With only one good hand, climbing that tree was difficult, but with the determination that I managed to gather at the time, I knew that I could do almost anything, as long as it meant getting away from myself. Slowly but surely climbing up the tree, each set of clones that split from me ended up falling onto the forest bed below. I had to be careful not to share their fate though, so I made sure to time each movement correctly, being sure to get up the next branch just after the clone split from me. If I failed to do that, the pain of being replicated might make me lose my grip. Falling to the ground wouldn't have been a bad fate if it meant death, but with a sea of clones on the forest floor, I feared I would only end up with more broken bones. If that happens, I would probably end up permanently stuck there and eventually piled on by my own clones. That was a fate that I wanted to avoid as much as possible. So I made my way up carefully, not rushing myself as I got higher and higher. My goal was to reach the top, but with the tree being so high, it was going to take a while to get there. Because of that, I decided to take a break whenever I found a large and sturdy branch, After I was sure that it was secure and wouldn't tip over, I sat there and allowed myself some rest, at least as much rest as I could get from the pain that I was forced to go through. As I sat during those breaks, I looked down below to the massive clones at the bottom of the tree. In the darkness and from atop the trees, they seemed to have blurred into one blob. Joining them were the new clones that tore off from me, who fell from my skin and tumbled down, hitting various branches before landing atop the pile of replicas below. Following one of those many pauses in my climb, I prepared myself to get up to the next branch when the most recent replication shook me a little harder than the previous one. With my body convulsing, I ended up slipping from the branch. And desperately, I tried to catch myself, but my shaky hand was unable to grab it on time. Time seemed to move slowly during that moment, as I watched myself fall farther and farther away from the branch. Tumbling down, I ended up facing down towards the ground, where other various branches awaited me. If I was lucky, I could perhaps grab or land onto one of them and prevent my continued fall. If not, I would be punctured by each one before I fall into the massive clones beneath me. However, as I landed on that first branch, something unexpected happened. Instead of feeling it slam onto me, I saw my surroundings suddenly change in the blink of an eye. No longer was I looking at the gloomy sight of my clones piling up below me. They were all gone now and were replaced by a forest bed filled with foliage. As I continued to spin and tumble down, I caught glimpses of the forest and saw that it was more diverse and that it was now shrouded in daylight. I wasn't in that terrible dimension anymore. That branch must have had a hidden link towards another dimension. I had escaped. But there was no time to celebrate though. I may have escaped that dimension of horrors, but I have yet to escape from my fall. Slamming from one branch to another, I grunted in pain before seeing the ground zoom towards me. Closing my eyes, I let out a yell before falling out of consciousness. When I briefly woke up, I found myself looking up at a white ceiling. In a dazed state, I looked around to find myself in a large room, with rows upon rows of hospital beds on either side of me. Focusing on these beds, I saw men strapped on each one of them. My vision was blurry, but I swear that I saw that they all had my face. And then as sudden as I woke up, I passed out again from a sudden surge of pain. The next time I came to, I found myself in a smaller room, a much cozier one. Upon waking up, the attendant there quickly fetched a doctor who greeted me with a smile. From him, I learned that I had been in a coma for over a week. For the most part, much of what he said didn't register in my mind, and deep inside I was too busy being overcome by relief, knowing that I had safely returned to my dimension. I had been lucky, extremely so. Turning my attention back to the doctor, I listened as he went on to explain my present condition. As it turned out, when the organization found me, I was still cursed with that uncontrollable replication. However, it seemed that the rate had drastically slowed down from what it was before, as I only spewed out a clone every 2 hours. Whether it was because I was no longer in the dimension that I was cursed in, I don't know. What I did learn, though, was that the organization had somehow cured me. Through an experimental method that apparently involved radiation and some other ancient machinery that they apparently had in their possession, the doctors and scientists managed to reverse my uncontrollable affliction. Hearing that sounded like music to my ears. I no longer had to go through the terrible pain of having myself cloned repeatedly. After the doctor explained everything that he needed to, he told me to get some rest before making his way out of the room. Just as he was walking out, though, I asked him what had happened to the rest of my section. And Jonathan and Catherine were nowhere to be found in the dimension that I entered, while Rachel and Henry never followed me in. I was extremely worried about what befell all 4 of them. The doctor's expression didn't look too positive, We were never able to recover their bodies, he simply said, and that was enough to tell me what had happened. I spent the next month in observation and recovery. During that time, I learned from friends in other sections of the exploration team that the whole team was being disbanded. Apparently, the organization managed to engineer some kind of organic robot to take our place. This disappointed many in the team, but I didn't care. At least it meant that I no longer had to go back into another foreign dimension ever again. However, there was one more thing they said that concerned me. More of the staircases had been appearing in forests, with each new one materializing farther and farther from the facility. Just like before, they spawned after the machine activated all by itself, which was becoming a frequent occurrence. Given the disaster our section and a few other sections experienced when exploring these wild staircases, the organization was apparently giving up on them. Labeled as too dangerous without any benefits, the organization would instead stick to exploring the controlled ones inside the facility only. The ones that appeared outside would be marked for burning in an attempt to destroy them and to stop people from climbing up them themselves. But still, some seem to slip through the cracks. That means that there are probably many staircases left unattended, free for any hiker or camper to stumble upon. If any of these people decided to play around with them and climb up the stairs, they might just end up in another dimension, one filled with horrors that they were never meant to see and harm that they were never meant to experience. And because of this, I want to give you all a warning. If you find a set of stairs in the middle of the woods, don't go up them. Be careful and burn them instead. First, a disclaimer. I'm not suggesting that anybody try this. Investigating abandoned buildings is dangerous enough even without the supernatural. You might breathe in toxic dust or get swarmed by ticks or spiders. You might run into rusty nails or psychotic addicts. And if you go looking for the night stairs, you might fall to your death, or worse. My name is Amber Lee. I'm 20 years old and I study journalism at a small southeastern college. I know I've chosen a difficult field to break into, so I'm trying to kickstart my career by combining work with my hobby, chasing down leads on strange stories from the dark corners of the internet. The first mention of the night stairs I found on a forum from 2002. It appears alongside other paranormal games that were popular at the time. According to the anonymous OP, the path to the night stairs is as follows. Find a place where a staircase should be, but isn't, such as the basement of a burned-down farmhouse or an unfinished construction site. Go there alone during a time of darkness, such as the night of the new moon. If there's too much light or other people are watching, the stairs will not appear. Taste a bit of grass, gravel, or something else nearby. Remember the taste well, as this will be your only sure way back. Close your eyes and believe, like really believe, that there's a staircase in front of you. With your eyes still closed, step out into the darkness. If you're standing on something solid, congratulations, you've arrived. From this point on, you must not open your eyes no matter what, until you are back where you started. The stairs might turn or lead down or up in a way that doesn't seem physically possible, and that's normal. You're on the night stairs now. As you continue your journey, you may find passages, doors, and other features leading away from the stairs. Explore at your leisure, but remember, you can only trust yourself to find the way back. When you wish to leave the night stairs, simply return the way that you came. However, keep in mind that the stairs may have changed in your absence. Since your eyes must stay closed, the only way to be sure that you're truly back where you started is through other senses. Remember when you chewed on a bit of the surrounding terrain? It was for this. When you think that you're back, taste something nearby. Once you are completely sure where you are, turn around and open your eyes. If you don't see any stairs, congratulations. You've made it there and back again. If you do see the night stairs behind you, however, you've made a terrible mistake. Nothing can save you now. The few comments were about what you would expect. Fake. I don't know, you guys, I know someone who tried. My idiot brother got tetanus playing this stupid game, don't do it. I'm gonna try, I'll let you all know. Hey, it works, I went down like 13 floors in a basement, man, what a trip. I'll be back with some proof for real. LOL, this guy got people eating dirt and falling in holes, what the heck. The thread didn't attract a lot of attention and it got buried fast, but it had an impact in other corners of the web like Dylan's podcast of the weird. Although Dylan's blogspot site was taken down in 2006, I found a downloaded episode dealing with the night stairs and transcribed it below. Hey, it's your boy Dylan back for another weird encounter. There's an urban legend around here that says if you go to a place where a staircase used to be on a night when there's no moon and you close your eyes, you can walk into a different world. Here's what happened when I tried it. The story says that you should rub your hands on the ground and lick your fingers for luck. So I'm off to a disgusting start. This place, it tastes like aluminum shavings and dust. I'm taking my first step onto where the second-story stairs of this factory should be. Wow, okay, there's something under my feet. It's like these stairs have carpet. Thick carpet too. Like shag from the 1970s. I guess I'll keep going. I've been walking for a while now, eyes still closed. I know I went by a hallway at some point. I passed a flat space and it smelled something like popcorn. There was background noise like the family living room when I was a kid, with the TV on in the background and kids laughing. But the air felt so cold. At this point, I'm higher than the roof. It keeps getting colder and colder and I don't think that I can keep going much longer. I'm gonna see what's down one of these hallways before I go back. Okay, I'm feeling my way down the hallway and there's wallpaper. It's, I don't know, sticky, gross. A big open space, a room, it feels like a kitchen. I'm running my hands over countertops, bowls, a rolling pin and some jars. Something's growing on everything. It crumbles apart like dried moss. Smells like mold when it goes up my nose. Makes me sneeze. Water is dripping somewhere. Wait. In the background, we hear something moving. The sound of pots and pans rattling and heavy barefoot steps. Something else is here. There's rasping breaths, circling footsteps, and then silence. Okay, I'm back on the stairs now and going down. I don't know what happened back there, but it really freaked me out. It threw off my count. I thought I'd come up 127 steps, or was it 133? I don't know. I'm going down now, but this can't be right. I've only gone down 30 steps and I'm back where I started. Oh, that can't be. Let's see, the ground feels like the factory floor. Okay, let's taste something for luck. Ugh, it's like spoiled meat. Phew, okay, focus up. I've just got to keep moving, okay? It was just a landing. There's some more stairs here. It's been 240 steps, I've counted them. Finally a flat space. Whoops. Something metal clatters away into the distance. Oh, this has got to be it. Some rubble under my feet. Good, a quick taste. Okay, dust and aluminum, we're back. Oh, that was terrifying. Can't wait to do it again next month. That was the 12th and final episode of Dylan's podcast of the weird. I wasn't able to track down who Dylan really was or find out if he really tried to access the night stairs again. Since all we have is audio that he recorded himself, there's no way to trace or confirm anything that was said. But something about the podcast going silent immediately after this episode got me thinking about the dangers of looking for the night stairs, whether they're real or not. That's what led me to Cora Lynn Begley. Cora Lynn's MySpace page was lost during the website's server migration crisis, but until then the page remained the same as the day she disappeared in 2008. Part time capsule, part grim memorial to a girl who suddenly just wasn't anywhere. Cora Lynn's playlist, lots of Atreyu and Blue Tangle, started playing the moment that I visited her page. Her profile picture shows a 15-year-old with mischievous, crystal blue eyes and hair dyed blonde and pink, wearing tight jeans, a studded leather belt, a black wristband, and a Hello Kitty spaghetti strap shirt. She lists her interests as makeup, everything goth, Cartoon Network, Guitar Hero, and supernatural stuff. I soon realized that police and Cora Lynn's parents had very different ideas about what had happened to the missing teen. The only thing everyone agreed on was that the critical clue was here, on Cora Lynn's MySpace page. The official version states that Cora Lynn's disappearance was related to drugs. The police suspect that she overdosed and those around her hid her body to avoid persecution. It's certainly true that many of her friends were later arrested for drug-related offenses. 3 were actually charged with involvement in her death, but more on that later. First, I would like to share her father's version of events. Jamie Begley has an iron gray buzz cut, a pot belly, and thick glasses. He sips a light beer in his recliner. His feet don't quite touch the carpet. A feeling of loss fills the Begley home, which is silent apart from the hum of the television. It has probably been like this since Cora Lynn's disappearance, the subsequent trial, and the divorce. The decor appears unchanged. Cora Lynn's high school photos and stuffed animals look down on me with empty black eyes as I interview her father, Jamie. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me on such short notice, Mr. Begley. Oh, it's my pleasure, Amber. It's been a long time since anyone gave a crap about my daughter or what I had to say. Do you want a beer? No thanks. Do you mean to say that you feel overlooked by the police investigation? Overlooked? More like ignored. The police had a story they wanted to tell and they bent the facts until they fit. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't thrilled about my Cora hanging around those boys either, all dressed in black and covered in tattoos and pale as a bone. It was clear that they were using, but Cora was always headstrong. Are you referring to Andrew Hall and the others who were implicated in Cora's death? Andy, yeah, him. He was a real piece of work. Always honking his car horn when he wanted Cora to come out, or peeling out because of some drama in his white trash family. To me, he always smelled like burning rubber. But don't think I don't see what Cora liked about him. Andy had curly black hair and big puppy dog eyes, and he knew how to wear that goth crap, even if it made him look like something out of some horror movie. Mr. Begley, do you think Andrew Hall was involved in your daughter's disappearance? Involved, yes. Responsible, no. No, the law did those boys dirty. I don't know what made Cora get into all that macabre stuff. Maybe it was the music, you know. The kind where the lead singer sounds like a raccoon getting strangled. I listen to it sometimes, you know, just 'cause it reminds me of her. But once Cora set her mind on something, she went all in there. But once Cora set her mind on something, she would go all in. There would have been no way that me or her mother or those boys could have stopped her from going after something once she had put her mind to it. And what do you think your daughter put her mind to, Mr. Begley? You gotta understand, Cora Lynn had it all. The Ouija board, the tarot cards, a crystal ball. She went all in. And as long as her grades were good, her mother and I let her be. We figured it was just a phase. And better she was mixed up with that than those jocks on the football team, right? But we didn't understand how deep into that stuff she was and how dangerous it could be. Dangerous how? and Jamie opens another beer. Look, I'm a Christian, okay? I don't believe in all that witch stuff. But that doesn't mean that it's safe for a teenage girl to go poking around graveyards and abandoned buildings at night. And there are some things you just can't explain. I mean, I was there one time when she did it. Did what, Mr. Begley? Disappeared. Well, are you saying that Cora Lynn had left home before? Left home? Hell no. I mean what I say. Disappeared. I still remember how it was. I took Cora deer hunting, God knows why. I guess with all the weird stuff she was into, I felt like I was losing her. I wanted some more of that father-daughter bonding time. Anyway, it was November and overcast and all the leaves were dead. We were camped out by an old half-burned-down cabin on my pawpaw's land when Cora Lynn asked me if I wanted to see something cool. So of course I said yes. We got our headlamps and went to what was left of the cabin. One of the staircases had burnt up in the fire, but Cora used the other one to go all the way up to the cabin's attic. She told me to turn around so that I was looking at the forest, and to turn off my light. I figured it was going to be some kind of practical joke, and so I did. When nothing happened after a few minutes, I turned on my headlamp and went rooting around in the old cabin for Cora. There was lots of rotting furniture and dusty trash, but no Cora. I looked everywhere. In what was left of the closets in that creepy attic. She was gone. I had given up and gone downstairs when Cora walked around the cabin to meet me. She was whistling, all pleased with herself, and she had come from the burned-down side. Now I ain't much of a hunter. The only thing I usually catch is a hangover. But there's no way a 15-year-old girl could have got out of that creaking, broken-down place without me noticing. When I asked her how she had done it, she just told me, "Oh, I took the night stairs." References to the night stairs appear on Cora's MySpace page as well. Yeah, you're right, they do. But all the police cared about was pinning the case on those 3 boys since they couldn't get some drug charges to stick. When I told them all this, the deputy gave me this sympathetic look like I was crazy, but he helped me to check around a few abandoned buildings around town, and just in case Cora had fallen and broken her own full neck. And did you ever try to find the night stairs yourself, Mr. Begley? He opens a 4th beer. Look, Amber, I'm starting to get kinda tired. I think we ought to wrap this up here. So you didn't try, even though you like to think the stairs might be involved in your daughter's disappearance. Is that right, Mr. Begley? At this point, I hear a loud creak from the attic of the silent ranch house. We both look at each other and I know that Jamie Begley heard it too. I'm done answering questions, lady. And did you or did you not try to find the night stairs? It's a simple question. What happened to you out there, Mr. Begley? The creaking gets louder. There's a sound like something heavy being dragged across floorboards. Jamie Begley's face is cherry red. His eyes are bulging. He rises from his chair and stomps toward me. For a moment, I'm afraid he's going to attack me. Get out. Jamie Begley closes a squeaky screen door in my face. As I pull out of the driveway, I see his bulky shadow in the doorway, waiting to be sure of my departure. The 3 final posts on Cora Lynn's MySpace page all relate to her boyfriend, Andrew Hall. Hey baby, you looked fine today. I love you. We meeting at the place tonight. Is 9 okay? Oh, you know it, babe. The place turned out to be an abandoned trailer near the highway. A search turned up drug paraphernalia, hair, and DNA evidence of Cora Lynn's presence. It was all the police needed to put Andrew Hall and his friends, Jimmy Hoffman and Sean Van Hook, in their crosshairs. But still, I'm more interested in 2 earlier exchanges. October 14th, 2008. You guys find the stairs yet? Nope, Moon came through the clouds and Andy fell on his butt. October 30th. Are you ready for your holiday? What do you mean? For all your witchy stuff tomorrow. I know, right? We already proved the stairs are true. Which urban legend you guys want to try next? For answers, I'm going to prison. I have an interview date set with Andrew Hall, Cora's boyfriend and the last person to see her alive. He's currently serving a 20-year prison sentence for his involvement in Coraline's death and related drug charges. Prison has taken its toll on Andrew Hall. From his chiseled muscle to his sharp cheekbones, Andy is all hard edges. But his skin has an unhealthy pallor, and there's something haunted in the rings around his dark brown eyes. When he approaches the glass window between us and his orange jumpsuit, I have to force myself not to recoil. Another reporter, huh? It's been a while. You all used to be on me like flies on crap. Not anymore. Always gotta move on to the next tragedy so that you can stay trending, right? Andrew Hall's voice drips with sarcasm. He hates the media, and maybe for good reason. And I'm already sure that this isn't going to be easy. Well, I'm not a journalist yet, Mr. Hall. Just a student. And I'm here to give you a chance to tell your side of the story. My side of the story? You wouldn't believe me if I told you. And if you really want to study, you should try prison. All the time in the world to read and think. By the way, you got any cigarettes? Well, no, I'm afraid I don't. About Coraline. Well, then I guess we're done here. My girlfriend died of an overdose and me and my friends hid the body. You can read it all in my confession. Really, it's a great read. Go get yourself a copy. Andy stands up from the rickety metal chair. The guards close in as he lumbers toward the exit. I know I'm about to say something inappropriate, but I can't help myself. Just because you plead guilty doesn't mean that you are guilty, Andy. That's not what happened. You aren't the first person I've talked to, and I know about the night stares. Andy stops dead. He slowly turns back toward me as though being dragged against his will. Let me give you a little advice. Forget everything you know and everything you think you know about the night stares. You want to tell me what really happened to Coraline, Andy? The fact that you're asking, that you've come this far, means you already know. But why not? I'm starting to warm up to our little conversation. It started with the heroin. Police got that much right. That's why they threw the book at us, you know. To make an example. Never mind that everyone from the senator's kids to the gym teacher was also shooting it up or on oxy or ketamine. But no, it was us who got the blame. Did Coraline use? Well, yeah, a couple times. Only when the rest of us did. She was younger than us. I guess she wanted to seem cool. You were her boyfriend. Did you ever consider trying to stop her? I didn't think there was anything wrong with it. What can I say? I was 17. I was an idiot. Was Cora using the night that she disappeared? I don't think so, but I couldn't say for sure. The rest of us were rushing pretty hard. I remember that she was going to be the last one to shoot up, but she just looked at us lying on the floor of that abandoned trailer. She had this look of light disgust on her face. I got this awful feeling. Like she was gonna move on to bigger and better things while I just stayed here and rotted in this stupid town with my stupid friends. I wanted to get up and go after her when she left, but your limbs get heavy, you know, and you start to feel all tired. And that was the last time you saw Cora. Time's up, Hall. On your feet. Andrew, are you alright? Why don't you ask Jimmy if he's seen Cora? He confessed, same as I did. Go ask him, I'm done here. A cursory search for Jimmy Hoffman, another of Andy's friends found guilty in the Begley case, reveals that he disappeared from prison 16 months after sentencing. Jimmy Hoffman is still missing. My quest to learn more about the night stares and the bizarre events surrounding them has left me with more questions than answers. So I'm asking, have you ever tried to find the night stares? And maybe more importantly, should I? What had started as an article about urban legends online was now an investigation into a vanished teenage girl and a missing prisoner. I had started this journey to develop my portfolio as a journalist, but how far was I willing to take it? My friends had noticed the dark rings around my eyes from late-night research. My interstate driving tips to conduct interviews and chase down leads cost me a fortune in time and gasoline, but I didn't care. I pulled over on the side of an empty highway in a flyover state, sipping cheap coffee from a styrofoam cup as I stretched my legs and watched the sunset. I felt alive. This was why I wanted to be a journalist. There is no feeling quite like knowing that you're on the tail of something, that you're on the verge of unraveling a great mystery. If I had been thinking clearly, I don't think I would have tried to find the night stairs. If this was the last thing that Coraline had felt, I needed to experience it too. I also needed proof to negotiate with the 3 boys involved in her appearance, who clearly knew more than they were telling about the night stairs. I found a place walking distance from my university that I thought could work. A broken-off set of flagstone steps that lead down into the hillside forest of twisted black trees. That jagged masonry was all that was left of someone's once happy home. It was deep enough in the trees that these streetlights wouldn't reach it, so all I had to do was wait for a moonless or an overcast night to make my move. I got my chance the day after I found those broken stone steps. Once again, fate seemed to be rushing me, pushing me into decisions that I couldn't take back. Even so, I took some extra precautions for my excursion onto the night stairs. I brought a backpack with extra food and water, a jacket for the cold, a pocket knife, and a blindfold. Yesterday night, I wrapped that black fabric around my eyes, chomped on the leaves of a nearby dandelion, and stepped off of the bottom step into the empty space below. My rational mind knew what should happen next. An embarrassing fall down a muddy hill into some thorns and dead leaves. But instead, I found myself standing on a hard, bare step. I couldn't believe it. My heart pounded and my breathing accelerated, and I had to fight the urge to rip off my blindfold and look around me. It had really worked. I was actually on the night stairs. I reached down to touch the surface below my feet. It was chilly and smooth, almost like marble. The stairs were about 3 feet wide, but when I reached the end on either side, I was grasping only empty air. Not knowing how high the ceiling was or how far below the floor it might be gave me a sense of vertigo. It was like that internal compass that we use to gauge distances, guess directions, and find our way around new places. It just didn't work here. Walking forward when you can't see is harder than it sounds. The stairs twisted downward in a spiral, and I had to be careful where I put my feet. I could hear and feel the breeze on my skin blowing from whatever was out there. It was a hot and dashing wind that made me think of cities burning. I kept walking. I had gone down about 60 steps when I reached the first flat zone. If what I had read was true, I could either continue straight ahead down more stairs or explore the area. The warm wind whipped around me, but the smooth material of the stairs stayed cool to the touch. I reached my toe out into the darkness beside me. There was definitely a hallway there, but something about it unnerved me. Since I had started down the night stairs, the primal part of my brain had been screaming a warning at me, and had now reached fever pitch. I didn't understand the warning at the time, but I withdrew my foot and continued down the stairs instead. I was passing the second landing when I heard something other than the wind. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought maybe my overexcited brain was imagining sounds to fill the emptiness. But it was laughing. It kept getting closer. It came with big, floppy footsteps and the tinkling of bells that kind of reminded me of medieval court jesters. Not being able to see was suddenly twice as terrifying. I froze in place on the stairs. It was coming from just below me. There were no walls to hide behind here. I was completely exposed, and when the laughing stopped, I had a horrible feeling that whoever or whatever had been making that awful sound was staring right at me. A few seconds later, the laughter resumed, and the tinkling bells disappeared into the distance. The sense of malice that the laughter left behind hung in the air like a black cloud. I wondered if the stairs had protected me from it somehow. I wondered who or what it was. I wondered why I wasn't running away as fast as I could. Call it pride, call it a fear of failure, call it journalistic integrity. I don't know why I hitched up my backpack on my shoulders and trudged on downward, but I did. My encounter with the laughter kept me tense for a long time. Each time I came to a landing, I stopped to listen, and each time I heard nothing except for my own ragged breathing. The size, shape, and steepness of the stairs changed as I went. I encountered materials that felt like brick, hardwood, corrugated metal, and even packed dirt. With so many changes and the tiring tension of walking blind, I guess it was inevitable. I slipped. My arms windmilled and I tried to collapse backwards into the stairs, but it was no use. I was falling forward toward the abyss. Shock and relief flooded me as my cheek hit something like sticky wallpaper. Thankfully, the blindfold was intact. I realized why I hadn't heard the wind in a while and why the air was so stuffy. Without noticing, I had entered a walled area. I touched my face where I had made contact with the wall. It was sticky and it stung a little, but I had no way to inspect the damage. It was time to decide if I really wanted to continue. Walking straight up the hundreds of stairs that I had already passed was intimidating enough already. After all, I am a journalism student, not a mountain climber. I felt the water and granola bars in my backpack and I made up my mind. I would explore the next hallway that felt safe, and then I would turn around. 20 steps later, the air was getting thick and humid. Instead of needing the jacket that I had brought, I found myself wiping sweat from my forehead as I walked. I stepped out into a large open space and paused to consider my next move. It felt like some sort of amphitheater. I was getting used to experiencing the world through senses other than sight. The total blackness hardly bothered me anymore. I was about to begin exploring when I heard the sound of a saxophone somewhere far away. A sad, lonely tune reverberated from the ceiling of the enormous space. Something about the music made me feel like it was live and not recorded. But who or what would be putting on a concert in this gigantic and empty chamber? Even more eerily, I recognized the tune. It was playing when my first college date took me to a jazz bar. It was a rainy night, my first week in the city, and everything seemed so bright and new. It was the first time that I really truly fell in love with someone. I wanted to walk toward the music. Once again, that animal instinct in the back of my mind screamed a warning. It was faint, but I heard it, and only after a few steps I was backing up. The problem now was, how would I find the stairs on the other side of the chamber? I had come off of the main track and every part of the floor was the same as every other. And what if I had gotten turned around? What if I wasn't facing the direction that I thought I was? All I could do was grit my teeth and move forward, that slow jazz saxophone echoing in my ears. I wasn't as far off as I thought. I had my hands outstretched like a zombie from a cheesy horror movie, and before long my fingers brushed against a rough stone wall. I felt my way along the dungeon-like wall in the direction that I thought the stairs should be until I found an opening, and then I headed down. One more, I told myself, just one more landing and then I'll head back. Hallways, open spaces, and rooms came more and faster, but each time I made some excuse for why this one wasn't right to explore. The sensations I felt when I stepped into them felt like some kind of bright lure, the kind that those horrific deep-sea fish used to draw on their prey. There was a corridor that smelled like my grandmother's cinnamon sugar cookies. An open space of wet grass and the sound of sprinklers made me want to run around like a kid again, even a room with soft, clean-feeling towels hanging all around, perfect to wipe off my sweating body and wrap up for a little while. I was about to turn around when I reached a dead corridor. There were no strange sounds or smells, the space just felt empty so far, and even the air was sterile and dry. If I was going to leave the stairs, there was no better place. I decided to drink some water and eat a little before I started exploring. The truth is that I was exhausted. I had lost count of how many levels I had gone, and the journey back seemed so long that I was afraid to begin it. Something felt wrong as soon as I started drinking. It took a few seconds for me to realize if I was drinking water, why did I still hear breathing? Unless there was somebody standing silently beside me. I dropped my water bottle and sprinted up the stairs. I tripped, busted my shins, and dragged myself up again. I realized that the mysterious podcaster had been right. I couldn't count on anything being the same on the way back. Hallways changed and disappeared altogether, and I had to contain a scream when I reached the jazz chamber. There were voices, maybe thousands, cheering hysterically for the saxophonist as he continued his lonely tune. It seemed impossible that I could cross the immense space without grazing against one of them. My blood was pounding with the fear of being noticed, being hunted, being caught. I told myself that as long as I stayed on the path of the stairs, I would be all right. But calmly putting one foot in front of the other while knowing that the breather might be inches from my face wasn't going to be easy. I focused on each step, and somehow my outstretched hand touched the rough stone wall before I bumped into a member of that frenzied crowd. And to make matters worse, the stairs themselves had changed. In some places, they became a narrow, tight space between endlessly high walls. In others, the ceiling was so low that I had to crawl forward on my hands and knees. My feet were like blocks of wood and my legs ached, but I didn't dare to stop. I was thinking that I still had about 2/3 of the journey left to go when my scraped-up hand felt spiky weeds and dead leaves. The chilly but humid night breeze greeted my face, and I even heard a distant car speeding through the early morning streets, but I wasn't about to be tracked. I felt around until my hand grabbed a dandelion stem. I took a bite, bitter and grassy. Just as expected, I was back. With a deep sigh, I took off my blindfold. The night stairs were gone. I spent a long time just running my fingers through the dirt and dead leaves, listening to the cicadas and other sounds of the night. I was glad to be alive. Somehow I was twice as sore as before when I finally staggered to my feet and limped up the hill to a streetlight. In its yellowed glow, I took out my phone to inspect the damage. The first thing I noticed was the time. I had been on the night stairs for hours, but somehow only about 4 minutes had passed. I checked my face in the camera. An ash-gray patch, like a kind of birthmark or a growth, covered my cheek where it had touched the corridor wall. It still burned and throbbed, but I was too tired to get it checked out immediately. Instead, I started the long journey back to my dorm room, checking for my keys as I did. That was how I found the note sticking out of my pocket. It was written on Hello Kitty stationery, the kind a 15-year-old girl might use. You haven't gone nearly far enough yet. XOXOXOX. Cora. When I finally got back to my dorm room, my legs were trembling. I was sticky with sweat and a weird gray growth covered my entire right cheek. But I had got the information that I had been searching for. The night stairs exist. They caused the disappearance of Cora Lynn Begley, and probably countless others as well. I envied my roommate, who was dozing contentedly in a messy pile of blankets. My own fight-or-flight response was still on high alert, and I knew I wouldn't be sleeping. Instead, I took my laptop and the data that I had assembled to the laundry room and planned my next steps. An incredibly large number of people around Cora Lynn appeared to have knowledge of the night stairs. Jimmy Hoffman had probably used or tried to use the night stairs to escape from prison. Both Cora Lynn's father, Jamie, and her boyfriend, Andrew, became evasive or downright hostile when questioned about the topic, and clearly knew more than they were telling. That left Sean Van Hook, the one member of Cora Lynn's trio of friends who I hadn't spoken to yet. According to the original court decision, Sean had the least involvement in Cora Lynn's death. He was released early for good behavior in 2015. After that, his trail goes cold. I was able to find Sean's mother's phone number, which I called as soon as I could without being rude. "Yeah, Mrs. Van Hook. Yeah, what do you want?" "My name is Amber Lee and I'm a journalism student. I would like to interview your son Sean. Do you think you could help me contact him?" "Look, lady, Sean don't come around here no more. He don't even call himself Sean no more. It goes by Moy Doe or some fool thing. He lives with those hippies down in Black Rock." That name, it sounded familiar. My dad is a second-generation Korean immigrant, and I knew what that name meant. Mystic Way. Could it be a reference to the night stairs? A quick Google search turned up the Black Rock Spiritual Retreat Center, a 4-hour drive away close to the state line. I had found my next lead. The diverse group of liberation theologists, Zen students, Sufi, and pagans who began Black Rock had wanted a remote and untouched location. As far as I was concerned, they had found it. I followed the brown signs from the state route between tiny towns to a forest road, and find the dirt tracks that seemed to go on forever. It was an endless maze of pine trees and jagged limestone cliffs beneath an oppressive gray sky. A simple gate and a weathered, hand-painted wooden placard announced my arrival at the Black Rock Spiritual Retreat Center. I parked and pulled the string on a little brass bell beside the gate. To my surprise, somebody appeared almost immediately. A cheerful young woman with a shaved head and orange robes came bounding out of the woods. She welcomed me and introduced herself as Sunshine. "My name is Amber Lee. I'm a journalism student interested in a visit." "Well, welcome to Black Rock. Here, please sign our guest book. There's a pull-off past the gate where you can park and walk up to the center lodge from there. We don't have any specific rules for visitors, but we do ask that you please respect the tranquility of our space. Is your visit for personal reasons, or something else, Amber?" I wanted to make sure that Sunshine opened the gate before I went into specifics. I had a feeling that kicking up dirt about a criminal matter involving one of the residents would be considered disturbing the peace at Black Rock. "Oh, it's actually about an article that I'm writing. And do you think it would be possible to interview some of the practitioners here?" "Oh, of course. We're always glad when our little project gets coverage out there in the big wide world. There are a few practitioners who have taken a vow of silence, though, and Father Vasquez, our last living founder, is very ill." I drove through the open gate and parked in the turnoff. The only sounds were the lonely calls of birds and wind in the shadowy trees. My university, the small towns that I had passed through, and the rest of civilization suddenly felt very far away. This was a perfect place to disconnect from the busy, complicated modern world. But if something bad happened to you out here, they would never find your bones. I don't know where the thought came from, but it made me shiver despite the humidity. Sunshine guided me along a clay path surrounded by wildflowers. She kept up a constant, cheerful conversation all the way to the main lodge, asking about my clothes, the news, and what songs were popular nowadays. I was glad to answer her questions. It allowed me to avoid mentioning the real purpose of my visit. Most Black Rock residents seemed far more suspicious of outsiders than Sunshine. When I waved cheerfully at a bald man working in his garden, he stared back at me with bulging eyes until we disappeared beyond the trees. Two women with gray dreadlocks whispered to each other when they saw us, and then hurried away as we approached. Maybe it was the way that I looked, with my made-in-China clothes, iPhone, sunglasses, and city shoes. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe not. The lodge reminded me of a temple. The big wooden building was painted with bright murals, but it had definitely seen better days. Nearby paths led to other, smaller structures where I assumed the residents lived. Some were barely more than tents made of scrap. Others were sturdy log cabins, pagodas, and even an adorable little cottage that reminded me of a gingerbread house. Sunshine clapped her hands together and bowed. "Well, I guess this is where I leave you. Enjoy your visit and remember to sign out in the guest book behind the sign out front." I smiled, nodded, and started snooping around. The main lodge was dusty, dim, and deserted. I rummaged through yellowed pamphlets, a disorganized library, and a vast, empty meditation hall. I was about to give up and go outside when I noticed a sliding door in the rear wall. Looking over my shoulder, I cautiously opened it. The light barely reached the room inside, but what I could see was definitely more interesting. There was a pile of rags on the floor beside some dishes, and the walls were covered with a bizarre mix of children's drawings, awards, and black and white photos. They showed a handsome, goateed man with long raven hair and a cassock. Whoever he was, he seemed important. Not everybody has a picture with both Pope John Paul II and Che Guevara. I was so intent on examining the photos that I didn't notice when the pile of rags behind me had moved. I had to hold in a scream when I heard a gasping, ragged breath. I spun around to see an emaciated figure laying, eyes closed, on the floor. Father Vasquez, our last living founder, is very ill. I got out of there so fast that I almost slammed into a tanned, muscular, and very naked man standing in the lodge doorway. "Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. Visiting Father Vasquez. That old man's got one foot in the grave. I'm Samson, by the way. Are you new?" "Yeah, my name's Amber. I'm just here to look around." It wasn't a very good choice of words, considering I was trying to look everywhere except right in front of me. "Well, welcome to Black Rock, where a man can be truly free. And don't let some of the killjoys around here get you down. We take all kinds, but it's been a rough couple of years, and a lot of folks have become pretty suspicious of newcomers and, outsiders. I did notice a lot of staring on my way in. Oh, water under the bridge. So, are you? I was wondering, do you think you could help me find someone?" "Well, as long as they want to be found. He goes by Myoidu, I think." "Oh, him. Down there, by the creek." "I see, and, Samson, I don't mean to pry, but it seems like you don't like him very much. Do you mind telling me why?" Samson glared at the cabin that he had indicated. In his eyes was a storm of dark emotions that I couldn't decipher. "Live and let live, I guess. See you around." As Samson bounced away, I took a path through the ferns to the cabin. It was well built and secured with solid wood shutters and a thick door. There was a staircase of about 7 steps, but the bottom 4 were missing. I heaved myself up onto the porch and pulled a bell cord similar to the one at the Black Rock entrance. I didn't hear any ring, but the door opened immediately, as though someone was expecting me. Inside, the cabin was completely dark. A match was struck, an oil lamp lit, and in its glow I was finally face to face with Myoidu, formerly known as Sean Van Hook, the third person implicated in Coraline Begley's disappearance. He is a short, pale man with an intense gaze. He wears his blonde hair short, and his dark clothing reminds me of a Zen monk's robe. The lamplight reflects off his thin black-framed glasses. My name is Amber Lee, and I'm a journalism student, and I'd like to talk to you about Coraline Begley. That's an interesting mark on your face. Do you remember Coraline? Tell me, is it warm or cold to the touch? He has a commanding voice, and his presence dominates the room. I find myself unconsciously touching the gray blot on my cheek. It's cooler than the surrounding skin. It's, cold. I see. Do you have any idea what you're doing? I don't. What do you think the Night Realm is, Amberly? A way to get more views on your blog. Individuals and governments have wasted countless hours, resources, and lives trying to understand it. In the end, they all give up. Do you know why, Amberly? Because things don't come back out the same as they went in. Take a look around. The glow of the oil lamp reveals the cramped, insane layout of the cabin. There are empty door frames, dead-end hallways, and dozens of half-constructed staircases. Some of them are even upside down on the ceiling. I think I should go. It was a mistake to come here. I'm sorry for disturbing your retreat. Go. I haven't given you permission to do that yet, Amberly. And anyway, there's nowhere you can go where I couldn't follow. Excuse me, are you threatening me? I back out of the bizarre cabin, looking around for Samson, Sunshine, anybody, but we're completely alone in the forested clearing. I am advising you, Amberly. No one alive knows more about the Night Realm than me. Do you really want to run away from here with your tail between your legs, your questions unanswered? Or do you want to learn the truth? I hesitate. He smiles. He holds 2 black blindfolds in his hands. I was in a commune hundreds of miles from civilization, alone in a cabin with an ex-convict involved in a teen girl's disappearance. The danger should have been obvious. But I was so obsessed with the story that I was chasing that I was blind to it. I didn't realize at the time that the man I had come to interview was a master manipulator. He led our conversation exactly where he wanted, and I naively followed along. He closed the door. The darkness is absolute apart from the glow of the oil lamp on the floor. Flickering glimpses of the crazy, claustrophobic architecture of the cabin make me feel like I'm on the night stairs already. The problem isn't that information isn't out there. Oh, it is. The problem is that it's never all gathered together in one place, because no one survives the Night Realm long enough to paint a complete picture. Except for you. Except for me. I suppose you've heard that one must access the Night Realm on the night of a new moon, or in an abandoned place. False. You probably read that one needs stairs to access the Night Realm. Also false. Stepping into any empty space while alone in absolute darkness will suffice, if belief is sufficient. I will show you when we meet on the other side. It's possible to explore the Night Realm together. How? Do you still not understand, Amberly? I built this cabin to explore the Night Realm. It's my own personal laboratory. One of us will enter from one room, the other from a different one. We'll find each other on the other side. I still don't see what you mean. The Night Realm responds to our psychological states and desires, although not always in the way that we intend. If you make finding me your focus and I do likewise, it shouldn't take long for us to meet. Now that I was faced with the possibility of returning to the Night Realm, I wasn't at all sure that I actually wanted to do it. I especially wasn't sure that I wanted to do it with this man, whose intense stare was already making me uncomfortable. The thing is, I don't exactly feel safe going back there. Of course, the night realm is unsafe, but there are precautions that we can take. For example, we must not speak while in the night realm. Speaking draws unwanted attention. Instead, we'll identify each other by touch. When I think I've found you, I'll grab your arm and trace my name on your skin with my finger. You will do the same to me. That way we'll know that we've found each other and not something else. You're not understanding. I'm not doing this. You don't have a choice. That mark on your face is bigger today than it was yesterday, and tomorrow it will be bigger still. You'll soon notice other, less pleasant changes as well. The solution is waiting in the night realm. I touched my face. He had struck a nerve. The mark already seemed to grow each time I glanced in a mirror, and I sometimes caught people staring at it. The darkness has made it colder and harder somehow. I try to swallow, but my mouth is dry and my voice is a whisper. How do I get rid of this thing? I'll tell you when we return, not before. There are several wooden boxes beside his bedroll in the center of the room. He opens one and takes out some shriveled, evil-looking mushrooms. Here, these will be our guide back. Eat one and then scatter a few on the steps as you descend. Don't worry, they're normal forest mushrooms. I dried them myself. He waits expectantly. I realize that I'm going to have to fake this. I grab a handful of mushrooms, but as I do, I also collect a few splinters of loose straw from the floor. I slip some straw into my mouth and pretend to chew on a mushroom. I make a disgusted face and he seems satisfied. Remember that taste? Here, take this blindfold. I'll remove myself to a corridor and prepare myself. You will step into the night realm first. Any of these half staircases or drop-off halls should do nicely. See you on the other side. And with that, he stood and disappeared before a sliding door along with his lamp. I was left in total darkness, alone except for my own breathing. I had mere minutes to come up with a plan and put it into action. I slipped the mushrooms into a pocket, tied on the blindfold, and felt in the darkness for a set of stairs. I scattered bits of straw along each step, took a deep breath, and then stepped off into the abyss. Maybe it was the non-traditional method that I had used or my own nervous mental state, but the night realm felt different this time. The air was stuffy and unmoving, and the darkness felt even heavier if that were possible. I took a few tentative steps forward. These stairs were steep, close together, and wet. It would be all too easy to slip. But that didn't matter. It was time to put my plan into action. I turned around and sprinted back the way that I had come. If I was lucky, I would exit the night realm just as he had entered it, giving me a few moments to investigate and escape. The night stairs, however, weren't cooperating. It was as though the place resented such a brief intrusion. Instead of 3 steps, I found myself climbing 10, 20, 40. I passed only a single landing. I could feel the cross breeze of the corridors, and as soon as I had set foot on it, a horrible sound of rustling wings, like millions of insects moving at once, it erupted from both sides. I clamped my hands over my mouth and staggered blindly ahead until I found the stairs. But the more anxious I grew, the steeper and more treacherous they became. I found myself climbing what was basically a slick and uneven ladder. Thinking about what Moidu had said, I forced myself to calm down and focus on my goal. I visualized the dark, empty room and myself stepping onto the hollow stairs. My heart rate slowed. The stairs leveled out. I felt a familiar texture beneath my feet and stooped down to taste some straw, just as I had remembered. It had taken me 4 steps to leave and over 100 to come back. I removed the sweat-soaked blindfold, although it was still pitch black in the cabin, and I turned on my cell phone light. I went straight for the wooden boxes. Some held dried beans, pots, and other daily necessities. Another held books. Inside the third box, I found evidence of a very different Moidu, the boy that Sean Van Hook had been. Some ticket stubs and guitar picks. A photo of 3 teenagers. A pale boy with thick glasses and shoulder-length blonde hair whose intense stare I recognized. A happier and healthier Andrew Hall. And nestled affectionately into Andy's shoulder, Cora Lynn Begley. There was a whole collection of photos that I doubted anybody had access to. Certainly not Jamie Begley or the police. Jimmy Hoffman and Cora Lynn rocking out someone's band practice. The whole gang trying and failing to do headstands along a pool at a house party. Cora learning to skateboard. Cora in the lunchroom, looking thoughtfully out the window. Something about the last photo rubbed me the wrong way. It looked like it had been taken without Cora's knowledge. That feeling only got worse when I held up the flashlight and shuffled through more pictures. Cora's bedroom window at night. A close-up of Cora's room. In the mirror, she can be seen changing her clothes. These pictures weren't someone's fond memories. They were evidence. I snatched them up, but I wasn't ready for what I saw underneath them. A familiar studded leather belt and a single-stained pink sock, just the right size for a teenage foot. That was enough for me. I got to my feet and got moving towards the door. An iron grip closed around my wrist. I swung my flashlight around and found myself face to face with Moidu. All that pretense of mysticism and calm control had disappeared. The angry, ignored teenage boy shone through. Maybe this twisted, rage-filled, pale face was the last thing that Cora Lynn Begley ever saw. Maybe it was the last thing that I would see. I screamed, but he didn't let go. I think it's time you told me what you're really doing here, Amberly. You can tell me the gentle way or the painful way. I'm not a physically strong person. I hate working out, and I've never been to a self-defense class. But I do know that in a situation like that, you have to keep screaming, you have to keep struggling, and you can't give up no matter what. He twisted my arm until I thought it would break, but my exhausting run up the night stairs had given me a single advantage. I was covered in sweat. When he tried to put me in some kind of hold, I slipped free of his grasp and ran for the cabin door. Of course it was locked. I cried, screamed, and beat my fists uselessly against the thick wood. You're coming back with me to the night realm. You can't even conceive of the things that I can do to you there. I felt someone coming up behind me, but I also heard voices outside. Samson was pounding on the wooden door. I thought that I could hear Sunshine's voice too. I screamed for all that I was worth. Somewhere behind me a door slid shut. I heard ascending footsteps and then nothing. A few seconds later, light poured into the mad cabin. Samson stood before me, still naked but holding a giant sledgehammer. Sunshine and the other Black Rock residents were clustered in a tight pack behind him. She approached and wrapped a homespun shawl around my shoulders while the residents searched for my attacker. It was useless. Sean, Moidu, or whoever or whatever he was, had disappeared. I took the evidence that I had found to the police as soon as I could. I said nothing about the night stairs and focused on what I could prove. Sean's use of the Moidu as an alias, his bizarre mountain cabin, the clothing that might have belonged to Cora, and his voyeuristic photos of the missing teen. The officer nodded politely but looked like he had somewhere better to be. In the end, he explained the county didn't have the resources to reopen an old case, just because of a belt and some dirty photos. My concerns about my own safety didn't get much more of a reaction. The officer offered to contact campus security at my university and tell them to keep an eye out for Sean. For all his good intentions, the message was clear. I was on my own. Driving home, I thought about Sean's warning. There's nowhere you can go where I can't follow. Was it just empty boasting, or had Sean found a way to exit the night stairs at a different point than where he had entered? I thought about how Cora's father mentioned she would go into one room and then seem to appear somewhere else. Just how much had Cora and her trio of friends learned about the night stairs before her disappearance? Back on campus, I asked Emma, a biology student from my dorm, to run some tests on the mushrooms that Sean had tried to get me to take. Emma was straight-laced and quiet, but when I saw her again a few hours later, I thought that she was going to hit me. She demanded to know if this was some kind of sick joke or if I was trying to get her into trouble on purpose. She had never seen anything like Sean's mushrooms, but they were so full of toxins and psychedelic compounds that she was afraid to show them to anyone else. Staring at the gray mark on my face, Emma told me that she didn't know me anymore and stomped away before I could explain. Sean had told the truth about one thing. The mark on my cheek was growing. It stretched from just below my eye to halfway down my neck. Each time I touched it, it felt less like normal human skin. I found myself avoiding bright light and my appetite had changed too. I was hardly ever hungry or thirsty, but when I was, it scared me a little bit. I spent hours in my dorm room with the blinds closed, scouring the web for clues that I might have missed, terrified that Sean might walk out of the wall at any moment. I had to solve this mystery and find Cora before he caught up to me. I was beyond the bounds of what was ethical or even legal at this point. Andrew Hall and Jamie Begley both knew more than they were telling, and my time was running out. Soon enough, I was in the woods behind the Begley house. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but I hoped that I would know it when I saw it. I couldn't help but wonder if I was hiding in the same bushes that Sean had used to stalk Cora all those years ago. The hours dragged by. Apart from the occasional bird or squirrel, there was nothing to break the monotony of Jamie Begley's routine. Watching TV, heating up microwave dinners, pissing out the beer that he had drunk. The only strange thing was one room on the second floor. It was covered by cardboard, but inside the room, a light was always on, 24 hours a day. And Jamie, I now knew, hardly ever went upstairs. What was going on up there? Jamie Begley finally went to bed around 1 a.m. I waited 2 more hours in the eerie nighttime woods just to be sure, and then I crept up to the house. As I used Jamie's own rusty stepladder to climb onto the roof, I told myself that I must be crazy, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to know. The roof was steeper than it had seemed from below. The covered, backlit window that I was interested in right above Jamie's bedroom, and I prayed I was being quiet enough as I crept toward it across the worn shingles. It was nailed shut. I was about to give up when I realized that Cora's old room was also on the second floor. The roof groaned beneath me, but I managed to scramble around to Cora's window. As expected, it was unlocked. I slipped like a ghost into Cora's bedroom. I wanted to explore, but I wasn't sure how much time I had. Light poured through the doorway gaps from the other end of the hallway. I noticed, disturbingly, that the door was sealed with a heavy wooden bar. A ring of keys hanging beside the door opened the 3 other locks that sealed it. 2 huge, buzzing lamps scorched my retinas. I glimpsed a mattress, dog food bowls, a foul-smelling bucket, and a long, thick chain. It was connected to an emaciated, sickly figure that I only barely recognized as Jimmy Hoffman. Jimmy Hoffman looks up with a terrified start as I gently close the door. He doesn't seem to know whether to cover his mouth or his ears, which are buried in long, uncared-for hair. When I take a few steps toward him, he begins shaking uncontrollably. Jimmy Hoffman. What are you doing here? He'll hear you, he'll come. I could ask you the same thing. You've got to help me. He's kept me locked in here for years. He thinks I know something about what happened to Cora. Look, how about you just turn out the light and go back the way you came, huh? Not until I get some answers. You being here is proof that a person can step onto the night stairs in one location and step off somewhere else. How? She's crazy. Typical. Someone finally comes and she's crazy. I should have known. How did you do it, Jimmy? Focus. We don't have much time. You need something from the place you want to get to, right? Maybe a pine cone if it's a forest or an envelope from someone's home. Then you get on the night stairs like usual and you focus on the place. You have to take a corridor until you find a different flight of stairs on it. They'll somehow lead to the destination. Of course, you gotta have some idea what it should taste like when you get there. An envelope. Jamie Bagley wrote to you in prison, didn't he? And you jumped at the chance to take the night stairs back here. I should have stayed. Anything would be better than this. Shh, let's just... I heard movement coming from downstairs. The interview was officially over. I was taking out my phone to call the police when I heard the unmistakable sound of a shotgun being racked behind me. I knew if I turned around and put my phone down like Jamie Bagley was demanding, I too would never leave that awful room. Instead, I dived at one of the lamps, ripping it from its plug. As soon as it came free, I flung it at its twin and plunged the room into darkness. I heard a cry and a blind shotgun blast that shattered the window. I ran for it and jumped out through the broken glass with my eyes shut tight. I was surprised and terrified when my feet landed on a step. I was so shocked that I almost opened my eyes. I was on the night stairs with no idea how to get back. Even if I could, confronting Jamie Bagley didn't seem much safer than taking my chances here. These stairs were wide and covered with grass. A warm breeze carried the smells of summer in suburbia. Pools, barbecues, fresh-cut lawns. I tried to calm myself and be practical. I knew how to exit the stairs somewhere else. What did I have from the world outside? The only thing that occurred to me for sure was the university ID in my pocket. I knew the place where it was printed on campus and that the walls should taste like brick and the floors and dust like a very particular lime-scented detergent that the cleaning staff used. I clutched the ID tightly and concentrated on the printing room as I walked down the stairs. Soon I found a corridor. Remembering the laughter and the breather, I paused before leaving the stairs. Nothing. Just like the stairs, the surface below my feet was well-trimmed grass. I started walking straight ahead, eager for the second set of stairs to appear. Maybe too eager. I had been walking for only a few minutes when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold. About 40 lawnmowers, hedge trimmers, and chainsaws had all started at once. They rushed toward me, accompanied by a horde of babbling voices. My brain screamed at me to run, but something told me that if I moved faster, they would as well. The obscene sound of so many machines created a knot in my stomach, but I forced myself to walk quietly back the way that I had come. When I finally felt the cross breeze of the stairs, they were so close that it was deafening, running toward me at an inhuman speed. I stepped onto the stairs just as they rushed by, swinging their cutters and screaming gibberish. My heart pounding, I clutched my university ID and continued down the stairs. The surface beneath my feet gradually changed to linoleum, enclosed by brick walls. I found a hallway with 1950s music echoing down it, and someone whistling while they mopped. The next landing features 4 hallways, but at least it was quiet. I chose the closest one and set off. I walked for a long time before I heard the footsteps. They were coming from a great distance away, and they were trying to move as quickly and quietly as possible. Something told me that if the residents of the night stairs wanted to be silent and fast, they didn't need to try hard to do it. This was something else. I thought about Cora, and then about Sean and his threats. What if he had been waiting for me in the night realm like a spider in a web? What if he was trying to find me just as much as I was trying to find the exit? Even if it was Cora, I couldn't wait around to find out. I fixated all my thoughts on the printing room, its dusty red brick walls and yellow-gray linoleum floors, the hum of the computer monitors and the smell of melted plastic and cleaning products. I could hear my pursuer getting closer and feel the strange air of the night stairs on my skin. But those things felt far away, like those dangers were about to happen to someone that I didn't know and never would. A familiar chemical smell wafted up from an open space that appeared on my right. I stuck my foot out into the emptiness and lowered it carefully. A ladder. Carefully, I climbed downward until my feet were on yet another linoleum floor. Cautiously, I crouched down and licked up the taste of lime detergent. I kissed the brick wall and the plastic monitors just to be sure, and then I snapped open my eyes. I had arrived in the printing room. The digital clock on the wall read 3:13 a.m. By using the night stairs, I had traveled a distance of several hundred miles in a matter of minutes. That wouldn't be easy to explain to campus security. I crawled beneath a computer desk and laid my head against the cool plywood and fell asleep. It was morning when I awoke. The printing room was nearly deserted, and the few students present didn't seem at all surprised to see somebody climbing out from beneath the desk. Yawning, staggering, and rubbing my eyes, I made my way to a public restroom to splash some water on my face before going back to my dorm. What I saw in the mirror stopped me in my tracks. The gray mark on my face had spread down my neck, across half my torso, and all the way down my arm. I frantically rearranged my clothing to get an idea of how far it stretched. The skin felt hard and lifeless, as if all the nerves had died. And was it just me, or had my fingers become longer and sharper? I frantically hid myself in a bathroom stall as a group of giggling sorority girls took over the restroom. As they gossiped and fixed their hair, I realized that if I kept my arm inside my sweatshirt and put my head up, I looked almost normal. Just another college kid stumbling home from an all-nighter, as long as no one looked too closely. I darted back to my dorm room. It was just as well that I had put my head up. The sun was too bright and burning. Back in my shuttered dorm room, I returned to my forums, frantically searching them for any mention of what had happened if you got an infected wound on the night stairs. I was so engrossed in my search that I didn't notice the figure approaching me through the shadows. "Hey," my roommate grunted. She held out a newspaper. "Isn't this the guy from the old case that you're researching?" Heart pounding, I scanned the article. Local man dies of shotgun wound. Jamie Preston Begley, 66, was found dead this morning. Symptoms of depression since the murder of Mr. Begley's daughter in 2008. Mr. Begley was found alone with a considerable amount of alcohol in his system. Injuries that appear to be either accidental or self-inflicted. Either way, Sheriff Thornton reminds us, drinking and firearms don't mix. That's the guy, right? My roommate mumbled as she chomped on a handful of M&Ms, her version of a balanced breakfast. I just nodded. By the way, she went on, poking at my face, you should probably get that checked out. When I awoke, it was dark again. I had slept more than 12 hours. Alone in my dorm room, I finally had a chance to fully examine the toll that my time in the night stairs was taking on my body. Almost half of my skin had become gray and hardened. When I reached out for my phone, something felt different. I had grown a sixth finger while I slept. It was obvious that the more time I spent on the night stairs, the faster I was being transformed. So I probably only have one more run left in me. I've got to make it count. I'm becoming more experienced with the night stairs, but will that be enough to find Cora and evade Sean? Will it be enough to find a cure for whatever is happening to me? Is there even a cure? I'm full of doubts as I pack my backpack for one last long journey on the night stairs. It's only fitting that I end this where I began it, on the broken steps in the forest near my university. I only hope that I can finish what I started. Amber Lee, 9/15/2021. Hi, Cora Lynn here. When I opened up Amber's laptop, this is the first thing that I found. I think she wants you guys to know what happened. It's hard to write about, it's hard to write at all. It's been so long and computers are so different. Everything is so different. I guess I gotta get used to it, right? I don't know what I'm gonna do yet, but first, I'm gonna finish this. So here it goes. Before Amber came to find me on the night stairs, I sometimes thought that I had always been there, like the world outside was just something that I had dreamed, even if the last thing I remember was more like a nightmare. Me, Andy, and Sean and Jimmy were all at this old trailer where we used to go to smoke and shoot up and goof around. And I remember that I just got so sad all of a sudden. Like this was all my life was ever going to be, you know. I went outside and looked up at the stars until the clouds covered them up, just thinking. You know that feeling you get when you're being watched? I turned around and Sean was there, like right there. He said that he had something that he had been wanting to tell me for a long time. He had been creeping me out lately, to be honest. But anyway, he said that my boyfriend Andy and Jimmy were both addicts and losers, and why didn't I run away with him? I didn't want to go anyplace with that creep, and I told him so. And he didn't like that at all. Sean said that I was acting immature and that he was going to take me anyway and that I would thank him later, and a bunch of other stuff that I didn't hear because I was running like crazy. At first, I tried to hide in the woods, but he was like a bloodhound chasing after me and calling my name. I was so scared of what he would do if he caught me. We were a long way from anywhere, and Andy and Jimmy were too stoned to do anything but lay on the floor. The night stairs were my last resort. I knew there was an old cabin out there that was half burned down. I went there with my dad once, and it had the right kind of steps. Sean was so close that I could smell him, and he was still yelling like crazy. He hadn't seen me though, so I took off my belt and threw it in the opposite direction to confuse him. The cabin was just a big black lump on the horizon, and Sean was back on my trail. I remember how my left shoe and sock got caught on a rusty nail, and I just yanked my foot out and kept going, down the stairs and into the darkness. I closed my eyes. And the worst part was that it wasn't over. Pretty soon I felt Sean step onto the night stairs too. He had seen my shoe on and guessed where I had gone. You see, Sean had been exploring the night stairs like the rest of us, maybe even more. I still don't know how I got away, but maybe it was like this. I just wanted to get as far away from Sean as possible. He, on the other hand, was probably thinking about finding me and also doing stuff to me, and also what his friends would think and how was he going to explain all this. I bet you see what I mean. I got away because he was distracted, while I had just one goal in mind. The problem was that before long I had taken so many stairs and corridors that I couldn't remember my way back. The worst part was that since I hadn't tasted anything, there would be no way to know if I was on the night stairs or not, and so I kept going. When it hurt to keep my eyes closed, I turned my bandana into a blindfold. After that, there was nothing to do but hope and pray that Andy or somebody would come after me and show me a way to get back home. Nobody came for a long time. I guess Amber already told you guys that time works differently on the night stairs, right? Well, here's another thing that Amber and I found out together. The deeper you go, the more time slows down. I thought I had been gone, maybe 2 days, when I felt this, I don't know, like a tug at the back of my brain. Like somebody was looking for me. Someone who wasn't Sean. He had come looking for me a whole bunch, but I didn't want to be found. This person was different. I decided that I wanted to find them first. I wrote a message on some paper from my journal, and then I stuffed it in their pocket and waited to see how they would react. And when they ran off and they came back a few minutes later, well, it felt like just a few minutes on the night stairs. I figured it wasn't anybody that I knew, so who could it be? I was curious and I needed a way out, so this time I let them find me. It's weird. When you're already on the stairs, you can sort of like rearrange things in your head to make it easier or difficult to get where you are. I guess I'm doing a bad job of explaining it, but it's something you have to experience to understand. Anyway, at first I was so scared when I heard her breathing that I thought it might be one of those things that sometimes turns up in the corridors. I guess she thought the same thing about me. But we just got closer and closer and neither of us ran away or attacked the other. Pretty soon we were within touching distance. It's gross, but I could smell her sweat and her perfume. I figured she was human, but I still jumped a little bit when she touched my arm. Amber, she wrote with her finger, here to help. Cora, I wrote back, thank God. Amber got really excited then. She started writing on my arm super fast. Chill out, I remember writing back, and I think she even giggled a little bit then. I was so happy to be found that I forgot all about keeping myself hidden from others who might be looking. We didn't hear Sean until it was too late. I guess he took the path that I opened for Amber and followed her to me. Out of nowhere, Amber just started screaming, and then she was gasping like she couldn't scream anymore, and there was something warm and wet on the front of my shirt. Sean had stabbed her in the lung, and before I knew it, he was grabbing my throat, and he was dragging me away. Something on the night stairs must have noticed Amber screaming, or maybe all the blood, because we heard this skittering noise like thousands of insects coming towards us all at once. Just then, I felt Sean let go of my neck and grunted. It sounded like a fight. I can't be sure, but here's what I think happened. Amber knew she was hurt and couldn't beat Sean, so she felt around for his face. While he was trying to stab her, Amber must have pulled off his blindfold and then used her fingers to pull open Sean's eyes. That's my best guess, 'cause the next thing I heard was Sean laughing. He was laughing like he used to when we were all getting high on the couch in the trailer and watching bad old movies. He was laughing like a maniac. And we left him there with the skittering things. I tried to hold Amber's hand and help her walk, but the blood made everything so slippery. She was holding on tight to her plastic student ID and whispering something over and over. When we finally found the stairs, we were so weak that we had to crawl up them, until we came out in this room that smelled like the computer lab at school. I heard Amber rustling around like she was checking something, and then she asked me to take off her blindfold. After I did, she told me that I could open my eyes too. It was a real room with a real floor that smelled like cleaning stuff and a real brick wall. I wanted to cry. I know it sounds stupid, but I literally hugged the floor. I was so relieved it took me a while to turn around and check on Amber. She saved me. I owe her everything. But what I saw when I turned around is probably going to give me nightmares forever. Only the left side of Amber's face looked human. The rest was twisted and gray. I couldn't see much in the dark printing lab, and I guess I should be grateful for that. She made a gurgling noise and pointed at the door like I should go. I had her student ID in my hand. That's how I found my way back here to her room. I'm sure Amber went back onto the night stairs as soon as I left. Maybe it's for the best. I don't know what's gonna happen to me now, but I'm sure of one thing. I'm never gonna set foot on the night stairs again for as long as I live. My hometown is in the heart of a national forest, and people go missing out there all the time. Backpackers who overestimate their capabilities or supplies. Teenage campers who fail to respect the dangers of the woods. Day-tripping families who put too much trust in their devices. If it had been any of them who had disappeared, I never would have joined the search and rescue effort. It's not that I didn't care. I was visiting for the first time in almost 10 years and only had 3 days to reconnect with all my old friends. At the time, I wasn't really sure what had kept me away for so long. I used the standard excuses about being busy with work and family obligations, but they weren't entirely true. Sometimes I still had dreams about being in the backseat of my parents' SUV on the morning that we moved, looking out at the rainy hills and feeling somehow certain that I shouldn't come back. It was an odd feeling meeting up with people that I hadn't seen in a decade. I had lived in town until the age of 17 and knew how hard life out here could be. But I was still unprepared to see the ravages of age, obesity, and drug abuse on people whose healthy, happy smiles I still remembered fondly. By the end of the first day, I realized that it was more than the disjunct between my memories and reality that was making me uneasy. People seemed tense around me, on edge, as though they wanted to judge how much I already knew before speaking about certain topics. I wondered miserably whether I was considered an outsider now, or whether perhaps there was something more going on beneath the surface. If Chet Miller had been able to hold his liquor, I might never have discovered the truth. Chet was an old buddy from high school, and I was staying with him during my visit. Each night, the two of us went to shoot pool at Sloan's, a dive bar just off the 2-lane road through town. While I watched him struggle drunkenly with the cue ball, I finally gave voice to what had really been bothering me. Why hadn't my best friend, Daniel Barnes, contacted me at all? Daniel didn't use social media, but it was a small town and I was sure that he knew about my visit all the same. Danny could have at least given me a call, I grumbled, and I downed the rest of my drink. It took me a while to realize that Chet had stopped even pretending to play pool. He leaned on the table and stared at me blearily. "You mean nobody's told you?" I shook my head. I had no idea what he was talking about. "Danny went for a walk last Friday and he hasn't been back since," Chet explained. "He told his ma that he might be gone for a while and that she shouldn't worry. But it's been 4 days now and the old lady's starting to panic. There'll be a search called by tomorrow. You'll see." Everything suddenly made sense. Maybe people had been so guarded because they weren't sure if I had heard about Danny. Maybe they didn't want to ruin my brief stay in town with worries that might turn out to mean nothing. Daniel Barnes had always been an odd character, even for a backwoods place like this one. And it wouldn't be the first time that he had gone into the woods alone. The strangest part of the whole thing was the secrecy. If Danny had just wanted to get away from the world for a little while, why bother telling anyone at all? Why warn his mother not to worry? Maybe I thought uncomfortably. It all really was just a big misunderstanding. Maybe I would wake up to a text from Danny asking when we were going to grab a cold one at Sloan's. At 6 a.m. the following morning, Daniel Barnes was officially declared missing. Sheriff Hopewell announced that teams were being formed to search the forest near the area where his pickup had been found. It was odd to think of Max Hopewell, one of the worst troublemakers in our high school, as law enforcement, but there was no time for that now. I was dialing the number for the volunteer hotline before I even realized that my fingers were moving. This was Danny Barnes, after all. Danny, who I had spent countless hours with during my childhood, playing late-night video games or shooting hoops in each other's driveways. This was Danny who had taken me under his wing years later and helped me overcome my painful teenage awkwardness. I had no doubt that he would have done the same for me. Daniel was an only child, and his single mom had always struggled to make ends meet. But if his background had bothered him, he never let it show. He was a star on our high school's basketball team, even if he couldn't splurge on designer shoes or equipment the way that some other boys could, and he had a love for reading that led him to become the top student in Miss Purcell's English class. At the same time, he was the one that we went to if a check engine light came on in one of our old beater cars, or if our parents wanted some firewood split. Daniel wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty to get what he wanted, but it seemed like all he wanted back then was to read his battered library books, hike every trail that he could find, and get laid as often as possible. With his long brown hair and athlete's physique, Danny had no problem finding a partner. On warm weekends, he would sneak out with his teammates and current girlfriend to camp at hidden spots in the forest. I had no idea how he found those places, but some of my happiest memories involved relaxing around a clifftop bonfire or skinny dipping in a midnight creek with my closest friends. It felt like those days would never end, until they did. Looking back, I suppose our parents knew what we were up to, but they let the whole thing slide. We were just teenagers being teenagers after all, and somehow nobody ever got badly hurt. And drugs and alcohol were involved, but Danny always stayed sober enough to drive us out if things went sideways. His maturity amazed me back then, and I often wondered why he never moved on to something better than this sleepy little town. And now I feared that he never would. The volunteer meeting point was at the same gravel pull-off where Danny's pickup was parked. Sitting there, covered by dead leaves and dust, it looked like some sort of ominous monument. My chest tightened when I recognized the trailhead beyond. This used to be one of our favorite hiking spots. Sheriff Hopewell stood beneath a tarp beside the trail sign, passing out highlighter yellow vests, bottles of water, and plastic whistles. It was a small town and Danny had been well liked. Over 20 people had already shown up to join in the search. I saw Chet wearing sunglasses and grimacing as he sipped coffee from a paper cup. He waved at me, but Sheriff Hopewell had separated us into groups before we had a chance to talk. Since cell reception was almost non-existent in the mountains, each group of 4 volunteers would travel with a walkie-talkie into Sheriff's deputy. In principle, all of the deputies and attendants had search and rescue training, but most of them were out-of-towners who didn't know these hills as well as those who had grown up here. "Aaron?" Somebody gasped behind me. "What are you doing here?" And that voice chilled my blood, and even after all these years, I still recognized it. "Hi, Kaylee." I smiled weakly. Most people, I figured, had the one that got away. For me, that person was Kaylee Bowden. Unlike a lot of my old acquaintances, she had kept herself fit and her eyes still had the same spark that I remembered from high school. And back then, she had hated my guts. Daniel's too, if I remembered right. I wondered what she was doing here. Before I could ask, the young officer in front of us spoke up. "My name is Deputy Lyle Higgins," he announced. "I want you all to form a line on each side of me. If you lose sight of the person to your right or left, stop and blow your whistle. We'll call out for Daniel as regularly as possible, but it's a big forest out there. Don't wear yourselves out." It wasn't until then that I realized I was in Kaylee's search group, and her position was right next to mine. We barely looked at each other as we stomped into the undergrowth, and we began shouting Danny's name. The sky was overcast, the forest floor still damp with dew. The snap of a stick beneath somebody's boot or the lonely caw of a crow only emphasized how quiet it was out here. Without a bunch of loud teenagers around or Daniel's confident presence by my side, these hills felt like a different place. Even so, I recognized a lot of the landmarks that we passed. And there was the big oak tree that Chet had broken his arm falling from during our sophomore year. There was the tall, phallic boulder which we had given a predictable nickname back then. I made sure to glance left and right from time to time to make sure that I was still in position. Kaylee to my left and... wait, who was on my right? I was at the end of the line. There shouldn't have been anybody there, and yet... When I looked again, the stranger was gone. Had they been a member of one of the other search and rescue groups? If so, where was their yellow vest? And why weren't they calling Danny's name? Had they been a hiker? In that case, why were they so far off the trail without any backpack? I had only gotten a momentary glimpse at them, but they seemed to be female, late teens or early 20s, wearing ragged clothes that had gone out of fashion years ago. I did a slow 360 turn, taking in the green ferns and mossy trunks around me, but there was no one to be seen. I realized with horror that by stopping, I had gotten separated from my group. A shrill whistle pierced the air. Kaylee and Deputy Higgins came jogging up to me. Both looked furious. Higgins warned me that if I fell behind again, I would be guided up to the trail and sent back. Kaylee said nothing, but the look on her face told me that this was just about what she had expected from someone like me. I tried to focus on the search, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the stranger that I had seen, or thought I had seen, in the woods beside me. The whole thing reminded me unsettlingly of the stories that we used to tell about the Painted Men. Depending which version of the local legend one believed, Painted Men might refer to an ancient tribe that had once dwelt in these hills. Some radical hippies who had created a commune out here during the 70s, or nothing more than the eerie artwork that could be found throughout this part of the national forest. The figures appeared beneath rock shelters, in caves, and even on giant trees. They were just doodles of little dancing people, although their eyes or teeth sometimes seemed a little too large, and their fingers sometimes looked more like claws. The archaeologists who had tested the paintings found that some dated back thousands of years, while others were less than a few months old. As a child, I had been frightened of them, but in all the years that Danny and I had spent stomping around these hills, I had never once experienced anything to make me believe that the Painted Men were anything but silly drawings. Now I wasn't so sure. And during our first break, Kaylee crouched down beside me and asked if anything was bothering me. "No," I lied. "Well, something is bothering me," Kaylee murmured, and then nodded toward Deputy Higgins. Although Kaylee hadn't criticized anything specific, I knew exactly what she was talking about. The search techniques that Higgins wanted to use didn't fit the terrain, and he had already gotten turned around a couple of times due to the maze of narrow trails. Those of us who had grown up here, like Kaylee and me, could use our memories and landmarks to find our way. For outsiders, it wasn't so easy. Higgins' jawline was tense as he reported in on his walkie-talkie. From the radio chatter, it was clear that none of the other search teams had found any sign of Daniel. "All right, let's get back in formation," and Deputy Higgins announced a few minutes later as he brushed away the crumbs of his lunch. "If you see anything, and I do mean anything, blow your whistle. It might mean life or death for Daniel." Higgins might not have known these woods well, but he was clearly familiar enough with these sorts of operations to understand that time was running out. If missing people weren't found quickly, they often weren't found at all. As we got to our feet, I asked Kaylee the question that had been on my mind since I had first seen her. "You know, I'm kind of surprised to see you out here. You and Danny weren't exactly close." "I'm not out here for him," Kaylee snapped. Her dark blue eyes glared angrily into mine, and then she seemed to come to some sort of decision. She pulled her phone from her pocket and showed me screen captures of a text conversation between her and somebody else that I knew. Bethany. I was ashamed to admit it, but Beth had been the girl that I had dated because I couldn't get with Kaylee. She had been Kaylee's best friend back then, but I soon discovered that the two of them were as different in personality as they were in looks. The relationship hadn't even lasted a week, but we had gone on one of Danny's weekend camping trips together. Now, based on the conversation saved to Kaylee's phone, she had apparently taken another trip into the woods with the man himself, Daniel. In her messages, Bethany seemed excited about the trip and even talked about how charming and mature that Danny was. And then nothing. "This chat is from 10 days ago," Kaylee said. "I haven't heard from Beth since." "Didn't you go to the police?" I whispered. "Well, of course I did," Kaylee scowled. "I was told that unless there were signs of foul play, there was nothing that they could do. And then they suggested that maybe Beth, my best friend Beth, had stopped talking to me for a good reason. Like me being too nosy, for example. Eventually, I gave in and called Danny, but he said that his little camping trip with Beth had never happened. Which means that either Beth is lying, or Danny is. I know it's a long shot, but has she said anything to you? Has she contacted you at all?" I shook my head. I hadn't spoken to Beth in years. Kaylee's story didn't make sense, but then again, neither did anything about Danny's disappearance. We continued trudging along the cliffside. We had been walking for about 10 minutes when Kaylee suddenly stopped dead. Her hand didn't go to her whistle. In fact, she didn't move at all. "Aaron," she mumbled, "could you come here for a second?" My first thought was a rattlesnake. They were common in these hills, and I still remembered the morning that I had slept beneath the stars and woken up to feel a loathsome, cool weight draped across my foot. When I approached, however, I found that Kaylee was balanced precariously on a rotten log. Beneath her was a half-hidden pit that opened like a black mouth on the face of the mountain, and from where I stood, I couldn't see the bottom. The rotten wood creaked and splintered. I sprang forward, grabbed the straps of Kaylee's backpack, and pulled us both over backwards. We crashed onto the leaf-slickened ground and slid downwards toward the pit. I rolled over onto my stomach and managed to wrap my fingers around a gnarled tree root. Our fall ground to a halt. For the moment, at least, we were saved. For a while, we just lay there, arms wrapped around each other, breathing hard and glad to be alive. Moving was painful, and we slid down one step for every two that we progressed. But eventually, we were able to get away from the chasm. As we looked around for the others, 3 angry whistle blasts split the air. "I've had it with you two," Deputy Higgins shouted, jogging over to us and narrowly missing the pit-like cave himself. "This is the second time you've broken formation, and don't think I missed your little conversation during break. If you don't like my leadership, you're welcome to leave. HQ." Higgins spoke into the walkie-talkie. "This is Higgins, I'm sending 2 back. And no," he added maliciously, "they aren't welcome to join us again tomorrow." As Kaylee and I turned back toward the main trail, I took one last look at the cave-like pit that we had almost fallen into. There were more painted men scrawled on the rock, and from where we were standing, it looked like the tiny figures were dancing downward into the darkness. All that line formation crap was a stupid idea anyway, Kaylee announced as soon as the group was out of earshot. We should have split into pairs and checked the game trails that Danny liked to use. You know, like the one that goes down to the jumping rock by the river. I think we ought to start there. How about you? I stared. What? Kaylee laughed. You aren't seriously thinking of giving up, are you? Our friends are out there, and these idiots are searching in the wrong places. Fine, go back if you want, but I'm going to keep looking for Beth. I had no doubt that we'd be in deep trouble for disobeying Deputy Higgins' orders, but I wasn't about to let Kaylee go trapezing around the woods alone. Moreover, the further that we walked, the more that her idea made sense to me. Maybe Danny had taken advantage of the good weather to hike down to one of his secret spots and had gotten himself hurt. If he had, I was confident that he knew enough about survival to have made himself a shelter, created a signal, and stayed put. When Kaylee and I reached the jumping rock, however, all we found were old memories. A few fallen leaves floated on the surface of that deep, slow-flowing water, so dark and still that it looked like black glass. The bend in the river created a sort of rocky beach, and if I squinted my eyes, I could almost still see us diving off the big limestone boulder that towered above it all, shouting and doing flips without a care in the world. Only one thing was different. A sinuous trail wound into the hills behind the jumping rock, one that neither of us had ever seen before. Kaylee and I exchanged a glance, stripped down, and then swam across the stream. The sky overhead was gray, the water colder than I remembered. Had we really splashed and played here, in a stream that was so murky and deep that none of us had ever seen the bottom? At the time, I had barely given it any thought, but now I found myself wondering where all that water came from, and where it went. And we dried off with my baggy sweatshirt before putting on our clothes and boots, which we had held above our heads during the crossing. "This city life must have been good to you," Kaylee commented. "You've changed." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Oh, come on. Danny had a new girl every weekend back then, and you weren't much better. You broke Beth's heart, you know that. There was a house party that night you broke up with her and she got blackout. I spent the whole night holding her hair back in the bathroom and wondering if I should call an ambulance." "Wow, I'm sorry, I didn't know." As pathetic as my response sounded, it was the truth. I had figured that the flings that me and Danny had back then were just harmless fun. It made me wonder what else I had misinterpreted, what other warning signs I had overlooked. "If it wasn't for how you two had treated Beth," Kaylee went on, "I think we actually might have been friends. You were pretty cool for somebody who hung out with Danny anyway." I was glad to be walking behind Kaylee so that she couldn't see me blush. As we had noticed from the other side of the stream, this trail felt literally new. I could see where branches had been broken off and deadfall kicked aside. It looked like a whole tribe of people had been through here recently, but as far as I knew, Danny and a few close friends were the only ones who knew about the rock's existence. We had been walking for about 20 minutes when Kaylee paused and gestured at another series of painted men on the cliff wall beside us. She wrinkled her nose. "I wish somebody would lock up these damn graffiti artists and throw away the key. What sort of person wakes up in the morning and decides to scribble on a rock in the middle of the woods?" The hair on the back of my neck stood up. My gaze drifted to the top of the cliff, where 4 silent figures stood watching us. They stepped back into the shadows as soon as I had spotted them, but I was almost positive that one of them was the girl that I had seen before. Even after they had gone, my feet felt glued to the ground. I felt cornered and trapped, like a hunted animal waiting to be shot. The simple touch of Kaylee's hand was enough to make me jump. "Those weren't searchers, were they?" she murmured. I shook my head as the full weight of our predicament began to sink in. The jumping rock was at one of the lowest points in the forest. Most trails followed the ridgelines above. Worse yet, all of the search crews would have assumed we had gone back to HQ, meaning that whatever was out here, we were alone with it. I didn't want to keep following the strange new path, but turning back felt even more dangerous. At least we were headed upwards. If we were lucky, it might even join up with one of the official trails on the clifftop. Kaylee and I had never explicitly agreed on the need to move silently, but we both walked as quietly as possible as we ascended the steep slope. Maybe that was why we were able to surprise the stranger who came crashing through the undergrowth. Unlike us, he ran desperately, careless of where he placed his feet or how much noise he made. And Danny grunted with surprise when he saw us. He looked older, of course he did, a decade had passed after all, but there was more to it than that. The flecks of white in his beard and the dark circles under his eyes gave him a haunted look, as though something had shocked the vitality right out of him. He wore nothing but a ragged pair of white boxers, and didn't appear to have eaten anything in days. I noticed uneasily that beneath the scratches and the mud splatter, his bare skin was spiderwebbed with yellowish purple bruises. What are you two doing here?" Danny mumbled. He glanced nervously over his shoulder. He was acting almost like something was chasing him. Looking for you, of course." I smiled and reached out to give Danny's arm a squeeze. Relief coursed through my veins. We had found him. Everything was going to be all right. Danny swatted my hand away. "You shouldn't be here," he said firmly. "Both of you need to get out of the woods. Now." "Where's Beth?" Kaylee butted in between me and Daniel. Looking at his injuries, I could already imagine what she suspected. They might have been defensive wounds caused by her missing friend. And Danny's reaction wasn't what I expected. He collapsed on the trail and sobbed. It wasn't a cry of pain or sadness, it was born of utter, complete exhaustion. "It's fine, let me be taken. I deserve it." Danny talked to his hands as though afraid to look either of us in the eye. "It was never supposed to get this far." "What was never supposed to go this far?" Kaylee demanded. All of her attention was focused on Danny, but I was squinting into the pathless undergrowth behind him. Where had he come from anyway? And what on earth could have frightened him so badly? "I was 13 the first time that I met one of them. Just a depressed, white trash kid looking for some peace and quiet in the woods. They told me that if I came with them, they would make everything better." Kaylee was getting angrier with each passing second. But if this was a confession, I needed to keep Danny talking, even though I might not like what he had to say. "Danny," I began gently, "you keep talking about they and them. Who are you talking about? Who did you meet out here?" "The painted men." It was the last straw for Kaylee. She grabbed Danny by his neck and slammed him to the ground. "My best friend is missing. You are the last person she was seen with. And you think this is time to make jokes?" As frail as Danny was, I was concerned that Kaylee's anger might do permanent damage. I moved in to separate them, but the look in Danny's eye made me hesitate. It wasn't hurt, angry, or afraid, just distant, as though there was nothing that anyone could do to him anymore. "You both grew up here. You remember the stories that we all grew up hearing. When I finally saw one of the painted men in the flesh, it was like, I don't know, magic. I figured that if that part of the legend was true, the rest might be true as well. I thought that maybe they could fix my life. I thought that maybe they could fix me. But it wasn't like that. It wasn't like that at all. They made me switch off my flashlight so that I couldn't get a good look at them. I saw their silhouettes though, stretched in black, like scarecrows against the twilight sky. When they told me to come underground with them, I was stupid enough to think that I could still refuse. I'll never forget the feeling of those 6 long fingers closing around my arm and pushing me into the mouth of the cave. It was the last time I saw daylight, until a few days ago. "Danny," I asked urgently, "do we need to get moving? Are we safe here?" My best friend rambled on, ignoring my question. "It was damp down there and dark, pitch dark. That's how they like it. They chained me to the stone, took my clothes, and then they started asking me questions. The name of my friends and people in my family, what my hobbies were, my favorite thing to eat. One of them grabbed my face in their hands and squeezed. There was a cracking noise and then another more awful sound, like meat being pressed through a grinder. And when the painted man spoke again, he was speaking with my voice. I figured they'd kill me then. It was only later that I learned they need to preserve the people whose lives they steal in order to refresh their appearance from time to time. I was held captive in absolute darkness. I drank what they drank, and God help me, I ate what they ate. The only signs of life from the surface were the others who they brought down, the ones who they used my appearance to catch. In high school, I hadn't thought that there was anything unusual about Danny's sudden popularity. Kids change all the time at that age, and he had just happened to grow into someone who was talented, handsome, and smart. It was all too easy to imagine what had happened next. A late-night camping trip, bonfire smoke and starlight. The thing that called itself Danny asks a girl to sneak off into the woods with him, and of course, she agrees. She probably doesn't notice the twisted shapes approaching among the trees, but if she does, their oversized eyes and wide mouths might remind her of the scrawlings on nearby stones. I had believed that Danny's friends and partners always came home safe from all those camping trips, but maybe some of them had never come home at all. Maybe some of them had been replaced by something else. How many of my old classmates were still chained to a cave wall underground? How many of the people I thought I knew were actually imposters? Just a few minutes ago, the idea would have sounded insane, but now I found myself almost believing it. More than anything else, the painted men want to be like us, you see. When they kidnap a hiker for food or just to torture them for fun, they always keep their possessions afterwards. They even wear their clothes. I thought of a raggedly dressed figure that I had seen earlier, and I shuddered. "They've been living here for centuries," Danny went on. "Maybe longer, and who knows how many they've taken." Danny's voice shook. "But a few days ago, something went wrong. That woman, Beth, I don't know how she did it, but somehow she was able to escape. She freed me as well and a few others. We felt our way along the pitch blackness, knowing that if we didn't make it to the surface before they returned, we were done for. It was sunset when we finally crawled out of one of the cave mouths. We decided to split up. I don't know what happened to the others after that, but a few hours after dark, I began to hear their screams." The sun had set beyond the ridgeline, turning the forest a gloomier shade of gray. Danny buried his face in his filthy, bleeding hands. "Go on, leave me. I haven't got the strength to make it out of here." In the quiet woods, the drawn-out whistle blast was deafening. Kaylee and I looked up. Whatever was going on sounded a lot more serious than just a line getting out of formation. "Come on," Kaylee insisted. "These woods are crawling with searchers. They'll be able to get all of us out of here before." Her words trailed off, but I knew she had meant to say before dark. Danny nodded weakly. He hobbled along between us while Kaylee walked in front, her ears pricked for the sound of the whistle. I, meanwhile, kept looking back over my shoulder. I wished the woods weren't so still. I wished that I could hear a bird song, some foraging squirrels, anything. It felt like the whole forest was holding its breath. The rhododendron-covered hillside was steep, and more than once, Danny needed help just to keep moving. And then at the top of a narrow gully, we saw him, Deputy Higgins. His right pant leg was torn, and beneath it, his knee was bleeding. He had his back to us, and he was blowing into his whistle for all that he was worth. "You?" Deputy Higgins snapped when he saw Kaylee. "I thought I told you to. Well, never mind. I took a nasty slip and I got separated from the others. But look who I found." The ground seemed to drop out from beneath my feet when I saw the figures behind him. Danny and Beth. The pair of them grinned down at us as Deputy Higgins continued to brag. "Oh, the rest of the team should be here any minute. Then we can all head back to." Higgins' voice trailed off. He had finally seen our Danny. The thing that looked like Daniel Barnes and never stopped smiling as it bent down, picked up a rock and smashed it into the side of Deputy Higgins' skull. He dropped, lifeless, to the ground. "Run!" Danny hissed desperately behind us. "You have to run!" He was so scared that he was shaking, but I was making a different calculation. Could I reach and unholster Deputy Higgins' service weapon before the two imposters could stop me? It was now or never. I lunged. As I snapped the pistol free and fumbled with its safety, the sun finally disappeared completely below the distant hills. There was a strangled cry behind me. I turned around in time to see two stretched, six-fingered hands reach out from a crack in the rock wall behind Danny. Before I could react, before I could even scream, Danny was pulled into the gap. For a moment, his bruised, half-naked form was caught in the narrow chasm. He stared up at me pleadingly, his eyes wide with terror. And then came a sickening snap, and the real Danny Barnes had disappeared from the surface world forever. "They're down here, quick!" someone yelled. Raised voices and more shrill whistles closed in around us. A group of searchers scrambled down the cliff, their flashlight beams cutting bright swaths through the rapidly darkening woods. One of them was Chet, and his eyes widened when he saw the bleeding deputy who lay among the withered leaves. "Oh my God," he gasped. "It all happened so fast." The thing that looked like Beth pretended to cry. 1 minute he was on top of the cliff shouting that he had found us, and the next he was falling. "Yeah, he hit his head on a rock," the thing that looked like Daniel added, with a wicked smile in my direction. "There was nothing that we could do. Fortunately, these two came along and called for help. Isn't that right?" Some of the searchers were already staring nervously at the pistol in my hand. Kaylee caught my eye and shook her head. We had no proof that the pair in front of us were anyone other than Danny and Beth, and we had no way of knowing how many of the searchers were painted men wearing somebody else's skin. "If the whistle didn't work, I was going to fire off a few shots," I muttered. I handed Deputy Higgins' sidearm to Chet. If there was one thing that I was sure of, it was that he was too stupid to be anything but human. One of the other volunteers used Higgins' walkie-talkie to inform Sheriff Hopewell that Daniel Barnes and Bethany Dodd had finally been found. There was no way that they could have imagined the truth. During our whole trek out of the woods, I felt Daniel and Bethany's watchful eyes on the back of my neck. It churned my stomach to hear the story they told. A perfectly believable tale of going off trail in search of a camping spot and becoming lost for days in the woods. Their timeline didn't add up with the call that Kaylee had made to Danny about Beth's disappearance, but we had no more proof of that than we did of any of the rest of it. At any moment, I expected more of the painted men to emerge from the tree line, but the only thing we encountered before we had reached the road was a single deer. It ran from our little group in wide-eyed terror. Back at the HQ tent, our reception was exactly what I had expected. Paramedics wrapped blankets around the rescued pair's shoulders and took their vitals. Danny's mother threw her arms around an imposter, unaware that her real son was miles away underground. As local news reporters swarmed around us, the thing that looked like Daniel beckoned to Sheriff Hopewell to his side. He glared at Kaylee and me while he whispered something into the big officer's ear. Moments later, Sheriff Hopewell called us into his HQ tent alone. "I'd like to thank the two of you personally, and Danny tells me that if it wasn't for you, he and Bethany might never have been found." All I could do was nod. My throat felt too dry to speak. What was going on? Oh, it's easy to get confused out there in those woods. It's easy to take a wrong turn, or think you saw something you didn't. It's a dangerous place too. Who knows how many bones are rotting out there in the bottom of some cave. Sheriff Hopewell's hands drifted to the belt around his waist. One came to rest on the holster of his gun. I thought about the Max Hopewell that I knew back in high school. All the pranks he used to pull, all the rules that he had flouted. I never would have expected that one day he would wear a badge, and now that I thought about it, hadn't he been one of the most frequent attendees of Danny's camping trips? How sure was I that I was standing in front of the same person? Sheriff Hopewell drummed his fingers on his pistol grip. There was something hungry and hateful in his eyes that made me take a small step back. "Well, I suppose I'm just rambling." Sheriff Hopewell shook his head and laughed. "Hope you enjoy the rest of your stay and don't get into any trouble. After all you've been through together, I'm sure Danny and Beth will be eager to catch up with you." And Kaylee and I backed out of the tent slowly and then walked towards our cars. There was something eerie and lonesome about the crunch of our footsteps on the gravel. Don't take this the wrong way, but I don't think either of us should be alone tonight, Kaylee told me as we approached her sedan. I glanced at the crowd behind us. Several of the volunteers remained oddly still in spite of the chaos around them. All of them were glaring directly at us. I turned back to Kaylee and I made my decision. Kaylee lived in one of the only 2 apartment buildings in town, an ugly 6-unit brick structure just off the state highway. The first thing that we did upon arrival was to make sure that all the doors and windows were locked. After that, we heated up some soup and a pizza from the freezer, took a couple of beers out of the fridge, and sat down around Kaylee's rickety kitchen table to discuss our next move. "Your plan was to leave tomorrow," Kaylee reminded me, "and I think that you should stick to that." I started to protest, but she shushed me. "Listen, we've got no proof of what we know, and if we do anything out of the ordinary, all we'll do is draw attention to ourselves. We don't know what these things are or what they're capable of, and unlike you, I have to live here. Please, for my sake, just let it go." Kaylee bowed her head exhausted. "I think I'm gonna go take a shower. And do you want to take one first? Whoever stays out here can keep an eye on things. You see, at this time of night, most of my neighbors are at home asleep, so if you hear any movement in the hallway or see somebody standing outside the windows." I shivered, but I accepted her offer. It felt amazing to scrub off the residue of those woods, even if I couldn't wash away any of the disturbing truths that I had learned. I switched with Kaylee and sat down on the couch facing the windows. As tired as I was too nervous to sit still. I looked around Kaylee's tiny apartment, curious about who she had become during the past 10 years. And there were plenty of framed photos of her volunteering at a 5K race the county organized to promote good health, or handing out water bottles in the wake of the disastrous mudslide a few years back. Kaylee hadn't been much of a reader, but now her shelves were filled with books. One of them had been taken out and left on the coffee table, an album from our time in school. I readjusted myself on the sagging couch and leafed through it to kill some time. Most of the photos I recognized. Kaylee and I may not have been close, but it was a small town. We shared a lot of the same friends, and there were only a few people we knew who took any pictures worth keeping. There were, however, a couple that were new to me. One showed Kaylee the summer before her freshman year, backpack on her back, sweater tied around her waist, and a wide smile on her face. Her arm was around the shoulder of the boy beside her, who I also recognized. It was Daniel or something that looked like him. A wave of fear swept over me, although I couldn't have said why. The two of them were only 14, too young for those now sinister-seeming camping trips, and there were all sorts of other reasons why they might have been in the woods together. A church-sponsored day hike, family excursions. They looked so close in the photo. Was it during one of those trips that Kaylee had first begun to suspect that something was wrong with Daniel? Or had he even? No, the idea made my blood run cold. Kaylee couldn't be one of them. Unless, wouldn't it have made sense to create an enemy figure for Daniel so anyone who suspected him would confide in them first? The water was still running in the bathroom. I stood to check the windows for a second time, but froze when I felt hands on my neck. "You haven't told anyone about this, have you?" Kaylee asked in a sultry voice as she massaged me. No, I admitted uneasily. "Why?" "Oh, that's what I thought. I checked your phone while you were in the bathroom. No messages, no calls in or out." "Kaylee, what's going on?" "This can be as easy or painful as you want it to be. Don't struggle." I would have sworn that there was some other voice beneath the one that I knew, gravelly, ancient, and terribly hungry. The fingers tightened around my windpipe. Vaguely humanoid shapes blotted out the light on the other side of the windows, and I knew that if I didn't act now, there would never be another chance. I lowered my chin and bit down hard on Kaylee's exposed fingers. There was an inhuman hiss. A bitter, blackish-brown liquid oozed into my mouth. Vomit rose in my throat, but my attacker's grip loosened. The window panes lifted with no difficulty. The thing that I called Kaylee had only ever pretended to lock up. The faces of the figures crawling through Kaylee's window were horribly familiar. I scrambled toward the bedroom at the end of the hall, sure that Kaylee would have stationed another one of them outside her front door. Just as I had feared, it swung open a second later, revealing a large figure in a sheriff's hat. "Hold him!" Max Hopewell shouted. I rolled into Kaylee's bedroom and blocked the door with an end table. Kaylee's car keys were on the dresser. I grabbed them, flung open a window, and leapt out onto the dewy grass. As I sprinted, I heard running footsteps behind me. I had a head start, but they were faster than I was. Faster than should have been possible. The parking lot lights rose like towering ghosts out of the fog. I mashed the unlock button on Kaylee's key fob, flung myself into the driver's seat of her sedan, and frantically locked the doors. It didn't even slow them down. I was still trying to jam the key into the ignition when Sheriff Hopewell's nightstick smashed through the window. With his free hand, he reached through the shattered glass and gripped my hair. What terrified me the most was the serene, almost pleasant expression on his face, as though he were watching a beautiful sunset rather than dragging a screaming stranger out of a vehicle. The engine finally turned over. Half in and half out of Kaylee's car, I shifted into reverse and stepped on the gas. I rocketed backwards and crashed into another vehicle. The impact had knocked Sheriff Hopewell off of me, but Kaylee and the others were already climbing spider-like onto the car. I spun the wheel frantically and then accelerated. Someone or something fell off of the windshield and cracked gruesomely beneath the tires. The last of my attackers flew free as I bumped across the green space and onto the lonely 2-lane road that led out of town. In the cracked rearview mirror, I could see them rising to their feet, their silhouettes inky black against the parking lot lights, reminded me of the paintings on weathered stone. It was the last that I saw of my hometown. I abandoned Kaylee's car in the parking lot of a bus station in the nearest city, and I bought a one-way ticket back to my life. My real, boring, humdrum life that had nothing to do with horrors that can change their shape or narrow places underground. Sometimes, though, I still think about my old classmates. I wonder whether I should have purchased a rifle and gone into the caves, guns a-blazing, to save what was left of the people that I once knew. It wasn't cowardice that stopped me, or at least, it wasn't only cowardice. Was it possible, I wondered, for one of the painted men to become so involved in their disguise, so dedicated to their role that they forgot what they really were? If I went into those caves, wasn't it possible that I might find myself chained to the stone?